The universe operates on principles we understand: physics, chemistry, the fundamental laws of cause and effect. But what happens when something defies every sensor, every theory, every rational explanation? When Federation science encounters technology so advanced it appears indistinguishable from magic, and within that technology, a being who will challenge everything Starfleet believes about power, personhood, and the limits of evolution? The USS Copernicus, a small Oberth-class science vessel, was conducting routine surveys of the Paulson Nebula when Lieutenant Commander Sarah Chen noticed the anomaly. It appeared on her sensor display as a geometric impossibility, a crystalline structure maintaining perfect environmental stability despite the nebula's chaotic plasma storms and intense radiation. Captain Rodriguez, Chen called from the science station, her voice carrying the controlled excitement of a scientist encountering the unprecedented. "I'm reading an artificial structure embedded in the nebula's densest region. Configuration is unlike anything in our database. Material composition appears to be a crystalline lattice that's actively converting the nebula's radiation into, I'm not sure what. Energy storage, possibly." Captain Elena Rodriguez moved to the science station, her decades of experience in deep space exploration tempered with appropriate caution. "Life signs. Scanning now. Captain, I'm detecting one humanoid bio-sign in what appears to be suspended animation. Metabolic rate is almost zero, but cellular decay is completely arrested. Whoever's in there has been in stasis for." Chen's fingers danced across her console. "Captain, carbon dating of the structure's exterior crystallization suggests a minimum age of 85 years. Possibly longer. A survivor?" Rodriguez wondered aloud. "From what? There's no record of any starship or colony losses in this region. Captain, the technology isn't Federation, Klingon, Romulan, or any known spacefaring civilization. The energy signature is similar to the Tkon Empire artifacts we've encountered, but the design aesthetic is completely different. And there's something else." Chen pulled up a spectral analysis. "The structure is emitting a specific wavelength of radiation that's actively suppressing the occupants' biological processes. It's not just preserving them, it's deliberately keeping them dormant." Rodriguez made her decision. "Tractor beam, full power. Bring that pod aboard. And alert Starfleet Command, we may have just found someone who's been waiting a very long time to be rescued." 3 days later, the crystalline pod rested in the Copernicus's cargo bay, surrounded by sensor arrays and scientific equipment. Federation xenobiologists, engineers, and medical personnel had conducted every non-invasive scan available. Their findings were both fascinating and troubling. The occupant was humanoid, male, appearing to be in his early 30s, approximately 1.9 meters tall with a physique that suggested either genetic optimization or natural evolutionary advantages. His cellular structure was extraordinary, bone density approximately 400 times human baseline, muscle tissue with molecular binding that defied conventional biology, and a cardiovascular system that seemed designed to process and distribute energy with impossible efficiency. But most troubling was the radiation signature. The pod had been maintaining an artificial environment bathed in what Starfleet scientists identified as red sun radiation, wavelengths consistent with Class M red giants. And the moment the pod had been brought aboard the Copernicus, exposed to the ship's standard lighting systems that included yellow sun spectrum wavelengths, something had begun to change. The occupant's cellular activity was increasing. Slowly, measurably, but unmistakably. His body was waking up, responding to environmental stimuli despite the stasis field's best efforts to keep him dormant. Admiral Alina Nechaev's face filled the viewscreen, her expression carrying the weight of command decisions. "Captain Rodriguez, I've reviewed your findings. This is beyond the Copernicus's capability to manage. The Enterprise is 3 light-years from your position. Captain Picard has been briefed and will rendezvous with you in 14 hours. Transfer the pod and all associated data, then resume your survey mission." "Admiral, with respect, this could be the scientific discovery of the century," Rodriguez argued. "My crew is perfectly capable." "Your crew is scientists, Captain, not soldiers, Nechayev interrupted. And I'm looking at cellular analysis that suggests this individual, if fully awakened, would possess physical capabilities exceeding anything we've encountered outside the Q continuum. If something goes wrong, if he wakes up hostile or disoriented, the Enterprise has the resources to handle the situation. The Copernicus does not. Transfer the pod. That's an order. 14 hours later, the USS Enterprise-D achieved synchronous orbit with the Copernicus. Captain Jean-Luc Picard stood in his ready room, reviewing the data Lieutenant Commander Chen had compiled. Beside him, Commander William Riker and Lieutenant Commander Data absorbed the information with expressions ranging from concern to fascination. Extraordinary, Data observed, his positronic brain processing the biological data at superhuman speed. Captain, the individual's cellular structure appears designed to absorb and convert electromagnetic radiation into biological energy. His physiology is optimized for an environment with specific stellar characteristics, most notably, a yellow sun of approximately G-type classification. Like Earth's sun, Riker noted. Which means our shipboard lighting is essentially feeding him energy. He's been in stasis for over 80 years, and now we're accidentally waking him up. Indeed, Picard replied, his philosophical instincts already engaging with the ethical implications. Which raises a profound question. Number 1. We discovered what we believed was an artifact. But if the occupant is sapient, if he is a person rather than a specimen, then have we just rescued someone? Or have we committed an act of salvage that violates his autonomy? Captain, the Prime Directive, Riker began. Does not apply, Picard interrupted gently. The Prime Directive concerns pre-warp civilizations. This individual, based on the technology of his stasis pod, comes from a civilization far more advanced than our own. If anything, number 1, we may be the primitive culture making first contact with superior technology we barely comprehend. Data tilted his head with characteristic precision. Captain, I calculate that based on current metabolic increase rates, the occupant will achieve full consciousness in approximately 36 hours. We should prepare medical facilities and establish security protocols. And we should prepare ourselves philosophically, Picard added. Whoever this individual is, he has been in stasis since at least the mid-2280s by our calendar. He will wake to a universe he doesn't recognize, among people he's never met, speaking languages he may not understand. Our responsibility is to ensure his awakening is as humane and dignified as possible. Even if he turns out to be dangerous? Riker asked. Especially if he turns out to be dangerous, number 1. Because how we treat those we fear reveals who we truly are. The crystalline pod was transported to the Enterprise's primary science lab, a vast space with multiple analysis stations, holographic displays, and sufficient room to establish a secure perimeter if necessary. Dr. Beverly Crusher supervised the medical preparations while Lieutenant Commander Geordi LaForge examined the pod's technology with his visor's enhanced vision. Beverly, this is incredible, Geordi said, his hands moving across the pod's surface without actually touching it. The crystalline structure isn't just a container, it's a complete life support system. It monitors every biological process, adjusts environmental conditions in real time, and has maintained perfect stasis for over 8 decades without any apparent power source we can detect. This is technology centuries beyond anything we've achieved. Dr. Crusher studied her medical tricorder readings. And the occupant's physiology is equally remarkable. Geordi, I'm reading cellular structures that shouldn't be possible. His bones are denser than duranium, his muscle tissue has tensile strength that exceeds industrial materials, and his cardiovascular system appears designed to process solar radiation as a primary energy source. If these readings are accurate, this individual is essentially a living solar battery. Which means every minute he's exposed to our ship's lighting, he's charging up, Geordi observed. Doc, what happens when he's fully charged? What's this guy capable of? I don't know, Beverly admitted. But based on extrapolation from current cellular activity? Strength measured in thousands of tons. Reaction times measured in microseconds. sensory capabilities that could exceed our ship's sensors. And that's just biological baseline. I have no idea what other capabilities might manifest. Counselor Deanna Troi entered the lab, her empathic abilities immediately sensing something that made her pause. Beverly, Geordi, I'm detecting something from the pod. It's faint, but it's emotional resonance. Pain. Loss. Profound, overwhelming grief. He's dreaming? Beverly asked. Or remembering, Deanna replied softly. Whatever trauma put him in that pod, whatever he was fleeing or preserving himself from, he's reliving it even in stasis. This isn't someone who chose peaceful sleep. This is someone who was running from something terrible. Captain Picard arrived in the science lab with Commander Riker, Lieutenant Worf, and Data. The Klingon security chief positioned himself strategically, his hand near his phaser though his expression suggested professional readiness rather than hostility. Status report, Doctor, Picard requested. Captain, our guest is waking up faster than projected, Beverly announced. At current rates, full consciousness in 12 hours instead of 36. The ship's lighting is accelerating his cellular revival. I can slow the process by reducing light exposure, but that would only delay the inevitable. He's going to wake up, and we need to decide how to handle first contact with someone whose capabilities we can barely measure. Picard studied the figure visible through the pod's crystalline surface, a man in his apparent prime, wearing a costume that seemed both functional and ceremonial. Blue fabric with red accents, a cape that suggested either cultural significance or practical purpose, and on his chest, a stylized symbol that resembled a geometric S in red and gold. A symbol, Picard observed. Data, can you translate or identify its meaning? Data's eyes momentarily showed the processing indicator of his positronic brain accessing extensive linguistic databases. The symbol does not correspond to any known language or cultural iconography in Federation databases, Captain. However, its aesthetic design suggests intentional communication, identifier or insignia meant to be recognized. I hypothesize it represents either family lineage, organizational affiliation, or personal philosophy. Or all three, Deanna suggested, her empathic abilities still focused on the sleeping figure. Captain, I'm sensing something else now. Beneath the grief, there's purpose. This person had a mission, a calling that defined their existence. Whatever they weren't just surviving, they were serving something larger than themselves. The pod began to emit a high-pitched harmonic tone. Geordi's visor detected energy fluctuations throughout the crystalline structure. Captain, the pod stasis field is failing. It's been holding him dormant for over 80 years, and our ship's lighting is overwhelming its suppression protocols. Whether we're ready or not, he's waking up. Now. Picard made a command decision. Clear the lab except for essential personnel. Dr. Crusher, myself, Commander Data, and Counselor Troi will remain for first contact. Mr. Worf, establish a security perimeter outside the lab but do not enter unless I give explicit authorization. Number 1, you have the bridge. If this goes poorly, be prepared to implement containment protocols. Containment protocols, sir? Riker asked. Erect a level 10 force field around the science lab and depressurize if necessary. I will not allow potential danger to spread beyond this room, even if that means sacrificing those of us inside. Understood? Riker's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Understood, Captain. Good luck. As the science lab cleared to minimum personnel, the pod's crystalline structure began to fragment. Not violently, but with deliberate precision, as if the technology recognized its occupant was ready to wake and was facilitating the process. Shards of crystal dissolved into energy that dissipated harmlessly, and the figure within began to move. First, a hand. Fingers flexed, testing sensation after decades of dormancy. Then eyes opened, impossibly blue, clear, and for just a moment, confused. The man sat up slowly, his movements careful, as if relearning how his body worked. Beverly stepped forward, her medical tricorder active but her expression warm and non-threatening. "Hello. I'm Dr. Beverly Crusher. You're safe. You're aboard the Federation starship Enterprise. Can you understand me?" The man's eyes focused on her, then scanned the room, taking in Picard, Data, Deanna, the advanced technology, the unfamiliar environment. When he spoke, his voice was deep, slightly rough from disuse, and the language was completely unknown. Kryptonian, Data identified immediately. A dead language not spoken for approximately 11,000 years according to archaeological records. "Captain, he is speaking an ancient tongue that predates most Alpha Quadrant civilizations." The man, realizing they couldn't understand, stopped speaking. His expression shifted through confusion, concern, and then deliberate calm. He raised his hands in a universal gesture of peace, palms open, showing he meant no harm. Picard stepped forward, mirroring the gesture. "I am Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the United Federation of Planets. You have been in suspended animation for over 80 years. We found your pod drifting in a nebula. We mean you no harm and offer you sanctuary aboard our vessel." The man listened to the cadence and tone even if he couldn't understand the words. Then, with deliberate care, he placed his hand over the symbol on his chest and spoke a single word in his ancient language. Data's universal translator attempted to process it, failed, then extrapolated based on linguistic patterns. "I believe he is identifying himself." The word translates approximately to hope or salvation. It may be his name or the meaning of his chest insignia. The man seemed to understand they were trying to communicate. He pointed to himself, then repeated the word. Then he pointed to the symbol on his chest, and this time, his pronunciation was slightly different, more like a designation than a concept. "Kal-El," Data said, his positronic brain parsing the phonetic structure. "I believe his name is Kal-El. And the symbol represents his family designation, the House of El." Kal-El nodded, recognizing that Data had understood. Then his expression changed, a flicker of hope followed by crushing realization. He spoke again, his voice carrying urgency and desperation. The word he repeated was clearly a name, Krypton. Deanna's empathic abilities sensed the emotional wave that accompanied that word. "Captain, he's asking about his homeworld. Krypton. He needs to know what happened to it." Picard understood immediately the weight of what they were about to communicate. "Data, access all archaeological and historical records. Search for any reference to a civilization called Krypton." Data's eyes processed for exactly 2.7 seconds. "Captain, I have located references. Krypton was a planet in Sector 2813, destroyed approximately 11,000 years ago in a catastrophic geological event. The civilization had achieved space flight and advanced scientific development before their planet's core became unstable. Archaeological evidence suggests minimal escape attempts succeeded. Estimated casualties, 8 billion individuals." Picard felt the weight of that knowledge settle over him. This man, Kal-El, had been fleeing his world's destruction. And now, 11 millennia later, he would wake to learn that everything he knew, everyone he loved, was not just gone but had been gone for longer than human recorded history. "How do we tell him?" Beverly whispered. With compassion and honesty, Picard replied quietly. "Data, attempt to use the universal translator with Kryptonian linguistic algorithms. Even partial communication is better than none." Data approached Kal-El carefully, his android nature allowing him to project calm non-threat. He activated a specialized communication protocol, speaking slowly while the universal translator attempted to bridge 11,000 years of linguistic drift. "Kal-El. Your world. Krypton. It is gone. Many years. You sleep long time. Very long time. We are sorry." The words were broken, imperfect, but enough. Kal-El understood. His expression transformed through shock, denial, desperate hope that Data was wrong, and finally, crushing acceptance. He had known, on some level. The stasis pod had been a last desperate measure. But hearing it confirmed, learning that not years or decades but millennia had passed. Kal-El collapsed to his knees, and the sound that emerged was grief made audible. A cry of loss that transcended language, that needed no translation, that spoke to the universal experience of losing everything that mattered. And Captain Jean-Luc Picard, who had faced the Borg, who had lost his family to violence, who understood what it meant to carry unbearable weight, did the only thing he could. He knelt beside this stranger from a dead civilization, placed a hand on his shoulder, and offered the only comfort possible to someone who had lost everything, presence. The simple act of not being alone in grief. In the science lab of the Federation's flagship, surrounded by technology that would have seemed like magic to ancient Krypton, the last son of a dead world mourned for a civilization that had turned to dust before humanity learned to write. And the crew of the Enterprise, despite all their scientific curiosity and tactical concerns, gave him the dignity of his grief. Because that, more than any advanced technology or lofty principle, was what it meant to be the Federation. For 6 hours, Kal-El grieved. The Enterprise crew gave him space in the science lab, maintaining respectful distance while providing everything they could think of: water, basic nutrients synthesized based on his biochemistry, blankets despite his body temperature remaining perfectly stable. Captain Picard remained nearby, not intruding but available, understanding that sometimes the greatest gift was simply bearing witness to another's pain. Counselor Troi monitored his emotional state from outside the lab, her empathic abilities stretched to their limits by the sheer magnitude of what she sensed. "Captain," she said quietly to Picard when he stepped out briefly, "I've never felt grief like this. It's not just personal loss, it's cultural extinction." He's not mourning individuals. He's mourning an entire civilization, billions of souls, and his own identity as part of something that no longer exists. He is, in the most literal sense, the last of his kind. Like Data, Picard observed. The only one of his type. Except Data was created singular. Kal-El was part of a species and now finds himself alone. "It's worse than that, Captain," Deanna continued. "Data never knew other Song-type androids. He has no memory of belonging to a community of his own kind. But Kal-El remembers. He knows exactly what he lost. Every face, every voice, every aspect of Kryptonian culture, it's all in his mind, preserved perfectly, and he's the only repository of that knowledge in the entire universe. Imagine carrying the complete history, language, and culture of an entire civilization inside your head, knowing it dies when you die." Picard was quiet for a long moment. "Then we must ensure he doesn't carry that burden alone. We'll help him preserve Kryptonian knowledge, record everything he remembers. His culture may be gone, but it doesn't have to be forgotten." When Kal-El finally composed himself, his eyes were red-rimmed but clear. He stood with dignity that spoke of cultural conditioning. Kryptonians, whatever else they were, had apparently valued emotional control and resilience. He approached the lab's entrance where Picard waited and spoke again in Kryptonian, his tone formal, carrying what sounded like gratitude and apology. Data had been working continuously on the universal translator, feeding it every scrap of Kryptonian linguistic data from archaeological databases and extrapolating from Kal-El's speech patterns. Now, when Kal-El spoke, the translator managed approximately 40% accuracy. "I thank your kindness. I apologize, my weakness. Krypton teaches, control emotion. I have failed." "You have not failed," Picard replied, speaking slowly so the translator could work in reverse. "Grief is not weakness. It is the price we pay for love. You honor your people by mourning them properly." Kal-El's expression suggested he understood, at least partially. He placed his hand over his chest symbol again and spoke, this time with what sounded like explanation. The translator struggled but produced, "This symbol, my family. House of El, science caste, my father. Jor-El, tried to warn, council would not listen, planet dying, he sent me, preserve Kryptonian knowledge. I have failed, all knowledge lost with Krypton. Not all knowledge, Data interjected, his android literal-mindedness offering unexpected comfort. You survive, Kal-El. Your memories preserve Kryptonian culture. Your existence maintains continuity with a civilization 11,000 years dead. By biological and cultural metrics, you represent the most important archaeological discovery in Federation history. You have not failed, you have succeeded in your father's mission. Kryptonian knowledge lives because you live. Kal-El studied Data with evident curiosity, his supervision clearly detecting that Data was not organic. He spoke again, and the translator rendered, "You are artificial machine intelligence. We had similar, but never achieved, consciousness. Remarkable. I am Lieutenant Commander Data, second officer of the USS Enterprise. I am an android created by Dr. Nunyan Sung. I am, like you, unique, the only one of my kind. We share the experience of singular existence." For the first time since awakening, Kal-El's expression shifted towards something other than grief. Curiosity, recognition of kinship, and perhaps the first stirring of hope that this strange new universe might not be entirely alien. Beverly chose that moment to approach with a medical tricorder. "Kal-El, I'm Dr. Crusher. I need to examine you, make sure you're healthy after such prolonged stasis. May I?" Kal-El nodded permission, though his body language suggested wariness. Beverly ran her tricorder scan and her eyes widened at the readings she received. "Captain, his cellular activity has increased 300% since awakening. Whatever process your father initiated, Kal-El, it's accelerating now that you're exposed to yellow sun spectrum radiation. Your body is absorbing photonic energy and converting it to biological enhancement at exponential rates." She pulled up comparative scans. 12 hours ago, your bone density was 400 times human baseline. Now it's approaching 600 times. Your muscle tissue is reorganizing at the molecular level. Your sensory organs are developing capabilities we've never seen in biological systems. Kal-El, you're not just healing from stasis, you're transforming. Becoming something more than you were. Kal-El listened to the translation, and his expression grew troubled. He spoke at length, and the translator worked harder than before to render meaning. Krypton, red sun, weak radiation, we evolved, low energy environment, my father theorized, yellow sun. G-type star, would enhance Kryptonian biology, exponentially, he chose Earth. Sol system, yellow sun, for this reason. I would become, more than Kryptonian, able to survive, adapt, preserve our people's knowledge, but now I understand, he made me, weapon. No, guardian. The word, difficult to translate. Your father engineered you to survive in an environment that would enhance your natural abilities, Picard understood. Not as a weapon, but as a protector. Someone with the power to preserve Kryptonian legacy even in a hostile universe. Yes, Kal-El confirmed, his understanding of Federation standard improving rapidly, his superintelligence allowing him to absorb language at accelerated rates. But I feel different. Stronger each moment. My senses, overwhelming. I hear thousands of heartbeats. Yours, Captain, beating 72 times per minute. Dr. Crusher, 68 beats. Everyone on this ship. I hear them all. I see, through walls. Molecular structure. Energy patterns. It is, too much. Sensory overload, Beverly diagnosed immediately. His enhanced perception is coming online without any learned filters. Kal-El, can you close your eyes? Focus on just one sense at a time. Kal-El tried, his face showing concentration and strain. Difficult. My people had mental disciplines, meditation techniques, but those were for normal Kryptonian neurology. This is, beyond my training. Then we'll develop new training, Picard declared. Data, work with Kal-El on sensory management protocols. Dr. Crusher, continue monitoring his transformation. And Kal-El, understand this, you are not a specimen to be studied against your will. You are a person under Federation protection, with all rights and privileges that entails. We will help you adapt to your enhanced capabilities, but only with your consent and cooperation. Kal-El's expression showed surprise, and something that might have been gratitude. You treat me as equal. Not as curiosity. Or threat. We treat you as you deserve to be treated, Picard replied firmly. With dignity and respect. Your abilities may be extraordinary, but that doesn't diminish your personhood. The Federation was founded on the principle that all sentient beings have inherent worth, regardless of their capabilities or origins. Over the following days, Kal-El's transformation continued. His Kryptonian biology, exposed to yellow sun radiation for the first time, bloomed into capabilities that defied Federation understanding of physics and biology. Geordi documented the impossible with scientific fascination, Captain's Log Supplement, Lieutenant Commander LaForge reporting. Kal-El's cellular structure has completed its solar absorption adaptation. Medical scans indicate his body is now operating as a living solar battery, storing energy at levels that exceed our ship's warp core output per unit mass. His strength has been measured at approximately 150,000 metric tons in controlled testing. He lifted a cargo container that mass as easily as I'd lift a PADD. His reaction time is measured in microseconds. And perhaps most remarkably, he has achieved flight. That last capability had been discovered accidentally when Kal-El, practicing movement in the Enterprise's gymnasium, had simply lifted off the deck plating and floated, suspended by no visible means. Data's analysis suggested he was manipulating gravitational fields at a quantum level, essentially creating localized spacetime distortion through biological processes. It is theoretically impossible, Data had reported to Picard. Yet observation confirms reality. Kal-El's biology operates on principles that transcend our current understanding of physics. He represents either an evolutionary path we have never encountered, or technological enhancement so sophisticated it appears biological. Or both, Picard suggested. Perhaps Kryptonian science achieved genetic modification so advanced it became indistinguishable from natural evolution. But it was Kal-El's emerging sensory capabilities that proved most overwhelming. His vision operated across multiple spectrums. He could see radio waves, infrared, ultraviolet, X-rays, and what he described as the underlying structure of matter itself. His hearing extended across frequencies humans couldn't perceive, allowing him to hear whispered conversations from kilometers away or detect the electromagnetic hum of the ship's systems. His sense of smell could identify individual humans by their unique biochemical signatures. It's like being reborn, Kal-El explained to Counselor Troy during one of their sessions. His Federation standard had improved dramatically, his superintelligence allowing him to achieve near fluency in days. I remember being Kryptonian, normal strength, normal senses, limited and comfortable. Now I am something else. Every moment brings new awareness. I can hear crew members dreaming in their quarters. I can see the atomic bonds holding the ship's hull together. I can feel the solar radiation from nearby stars through the ship's shields. It is beautiful and terrifying. You're learning to be something you were never meant to be, Deanna observed gently. Your father designed you to adapt to a yellow sun environment, but you were raised on Krypton, under a red sun. You had no childhood spent learning to control these abilities. You're experiencing what human children go through, learning to walk, to control your body, except you're doing it with godlike capabilities. Godlike, Kal-El repeated, and his expression darkened. Counselor, I do not wish to be a god. Krypton had legends of such beings, entities with power beyond mortal comprehension. Those stories always ended in tragedy. Gods become tyrants, or they abandon those they should protect. I do not wish to be either. Then don't be, Deanna said simply. You have power, yes. But power doesn't determine character. Choice does. You can choose how to use these abilities. But should I use them? Kal-El pressed. I have been reading your Federation database, learning about your principles. The Prime Directive, non-interference with less developed civilizations. By that standard, am I not obligated to refrain from using my power? I am exponentially more capable than any Federation citizen. If I act, am I not violating the spirit of your most sacred law? The Prime Directive applies to civilizations, not individuals, Deanna explained. It prevents the Federation from imposing our values and technology on cultures that haven't developed spaceflight independently. But you're not a civilization, you're a person. And people are allowed to help each other, regardless of their capability disparity. Yet I could reshape worlds, Kal-El argued. Move planets, redirect stars, alter the course of entire civilizations through my actions. At what point does personal assistance become cultural interference? Deanna had no easy answer. That's a question philosophers have debated for centuries, Kal-El. I can't give you a definitive answer. But I can tell you this, the fact that you're asking the question, that you're concerned about the ethical implications of your power, suggests you're exactly the kind of person who should have that power. Their philosophical discussion was interrupted by red alert klaxons. Picard's voice came over the ship-wide comm, all senior staff to the bridge. Kal-El, your presence is requested as well. We have a situation. The bridge was controlled chaos when Kal-El arrived. The main view screen showed a massive cube-shaped vessel, dark, ominous, covered in technological components that pulsed with green light. Borg, Worf announced grimly. Cube-class vessel, bearing 143 Mark 7. They're on an intercept course. Distance, 200,000 kilometers and closing. Kal-El's enhanced vision focused on the view screen, and he gasped. I can see them. Inside the ship. Thousands of beings, merged with technology. They're all connected. One mind controlling thousands of bodies. How is this possible? The Borg are a collective consciousness, Picard explained, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd faced this enemy before and bore the scars. They assimilate species and technology, adding distinctiveness to their own. They've conquered thousands of civilizations, and they're one of the greatest threats the Federation has ever faced. The view screen shifted to show a Borg drone, a humanoid figure covered in technological implants, skin pale and lifeless, one eye replaced by a cybernetic implant. The drone's voice was mechanical, emotionless. We are the Borg. You will be assimilated. Resistance is futile. However, we have detected an anomaly aboard your vessel. The biological entity designated Kal-El possesses unique characteristics. Surrender him to us and the rest of your crew will be granted 10 minutes to evacuate before assimilation begins. Kal-El's expression hardened. They want to assimilate me. Turn me into one of them. Yes, Picard confirmed. Your abilities make you valuable to the collective. They would study you, replicate your capabilities if possible, or simply add you to their hive mind. Kal-El, you are under Federation protection. We will not surrender you. Captain, with respect, you cannot fight them to protect me, Kal-El replied. I've read about the Borg. Your Wolf 359, 39 starships destroyed, 11,000 casualties. You cannot sacrifice your crew for one individual. We're not sacrificing anyone, Picard said firmly. Mr. Worf, charge all weapons. Mr. Data, evasive maneuvers. And Kal-El, I need you to understand something. The Federation doesn't abandon people. We protect those who can't protect themselves, and we stand with our allies. You are one of us now. The Borg cube fired. Green cutting beams lanced across space, impacting the Enterprise's shields. The ship shuddered, and console displays showed shields dropping to 82%. Kal-El made a decision. Before anyone could stop him, he moved to the turbolift. I will not let innocents die for me. Captain, with your permission, I will face the Borg directly. Kal-El, wait, Picard began. But the Kryptonian was already gone, moving with super speed that made him a blur. Within seconds, he'd reached the transporter room, operated the controls with superintelligence that allowed him to understand Federation technology after mere days of observation, and beamed himself into space directly between the Enterprise and the Borg cube. On the bridge, the view screen showed Kal-El floating in vacuum, no environmental suit, no life support, simply existing in hard vacuum as if it were breathable atmosphere. His cape billowed in solar wind, and his expression carried grim determination. "My God," Riker whispered. "He's actually out there." Kal-El transmitted using his comm badge, his voice calm despite the impossible situation. "Borg vessel, this is Kal-El of Krypton. You want me? Then face me. Leave the Enterprise alone." The Borg response was immediate. Tractor beams locked onto Kal-El, attempting to draw him toward the cube's assimilation chambers. But he didn't move. His strength, his mass somehow anchored despite the lack of physical leverage, resisted the Borg technology. Then Kal-El did something that would be analyzed by Federation scientists for years. His eyes glowed red, and beams of concentrated thermal energy, heat vision, he would later explain, lanced across space. The energy struck the Borg cube's outer hull, and where it touched, metal melted. Components exploded. Systems failed. The Borg adapted quickly, reconfiguring their shields to deflect the thermal energy. But Kal-El simply increased the intensity. His eyes blazed brighter, and the concentrated power of a miniature sun's worth of energy focused through his Kryptonian biology carved through Borg defenses like they were paper. Adaptation insufficient, the Borg transmitted. Biological energy projection exceeds predicted parameters. Kal-El represents technology beyond collective knowledge. Immediate assimilation required. The cube launched drones, hundreds of Borg materializing in space, magnetic boots allowing them to maneuver. They swarmed Kal-El, attempting to inject nanoprobes, to begin assimilation. But his invulnerable skin rejected the injection. His strength allowed him to tear through drones with casual ease. And his speed meant dozens of Borg were disabled before they could adapt. On the Enterprise bridge, the crew watched in awe. "Captain," Data reported, his voice carrying unusual emotion, "Kal-El is single-handedly engaging a Borg cube. His combat effectiveness exceeds anything in our tactical databases. He represents a force multiplier previously considered impossible outside omnipotent entities like Q. He's protecting us," Deanna breathed. "Sacrificing himself to keep the Enterprise safe. Captain, I'm sensing absolute determination. He would rather die fighting than allow the Borg to assimilate him or harm this crew." Picard made a command decision. "Mr. Worf, target the Borg cube's power distribution nodes. Quantum torpedoes, full spread. We're not letting him fight alone. All hands, battle stations. Today we teach the Borg that some individuals are worth fighting for." The Enterprise's weapons fire joined Kal-El's assault. Quantum torpedoes and phaser arrays hammered the cube while Kal-El tore through its outer structure with his bare hands, ripping away armor plating, destroying weapon emplacements, creating catastrophic hull breaches that vented thousands of drones into space. The battle lasted 14 minutes. When it ended, the Borg cube was a drifting wreck, its systems failing, its collective consciousness disrupted by the sheer impossibility of one biological entity causing such damage. The surviving drones transmitted a final message: Kal-El of Krypton represents unacceptable variable. Classification: Omega-level threat. Recommendation: avoid engagement until adaptation protocols developed. Tactical retreat authorized. The cube limped away at damaged warp speed, and Kal-El floated in space, breathing hard despite not needing oxygen, his costume scorched but intact, his expression mixing triumph and horror at what he'd just done. Captain Picard transported him back to the bridge personally. When Kal-El materialized, the entire bridge crew stared. Some with awe. Some with fear. All with the recognition that they just witnessed something that would change the balance of power in the Alpha Quadrant. "Kal-El," Picard said quietly, "you saved us. The entire crew owes you their lives." I also revealed what I'm capable of, Kal-El replied, and his voice carried deep concern. Captain, the Borg will adapt. They'll develop countermeasures. And worse, every faction in this quadrant will learn that someone with my capabilities exists. I've just painted a target on myself and on anyone associated with me. Picard understood the implication immediately. The Federation had just acquired the galaxy's most powerful protector. And the galaxy's most dangerous liability. The Enterprise proceeded to Starbase 74 under heightened alert protocols. Kal-El's confrontation with the Borg had been witnessed by 3 other vessels whose long-range sensors had detected the engagement, 2 Federation science ships and, more troubling, a Romulan scout vessel that had cloaked immediately after observing the battle. Within 6 hours, every major power in the Alpha Quadrant would know that the Federation had discovered a being capable of single-handedly destroying Borg cubes. Captain Picard stood in his ready room with Admiral Nechayev's stern face filling his view screen. Behind her, he could see 2 other admirals and what appeared to be Federation Council members. Captain Picard, I've reviewed your logs regarding Kal-El, Nechayev began without preamble. What you've described represents either the greatest discovery in Federation history or the greatest threat. I haven't decided which. Admiral, Kal-El saved the Enterprise. He risked his life to protect my crew from Borg assimilation. His actions were heroic, not threatening. His actions were also apocalyptic, Captain, another admiral interjected, Admiral Brackett from Starfleet Tactical. He destroyed a Borg cube with his bare hands. Do you understand what that means strategically? One individual with capabilities that exceed our entire fleet. If he decided to attack Earth, to conquer the Federation, what could stop him? His character, Admiral, Picard replied firmly. I've spent days observing Kal-El. He is profoundly moral, deeply concerned about the ethical implications of his power. He grieves for his lost civilization and is trying to find purpose in a universe that's alien to him. He is not a threat. He's not a threat yet, Nechayev corrected. But power corrupts, Captain. You know that. An absolute power, which is what Kal-El possesses, corrupts absolutely. Today he's grateful to the Federation for rescuing him. Tomorrow, when he's more comfortable with his abilities, when he's less emotionally vulnerable, what then? Does he decide Federation laws don't apply to him? Does he impose his will on entire civilizations because he believes he knows better? Admiral, those are hypothetical concerns. Based on historical precedent, Brackett interrupted. Captain, we've encountered godlike beings before. The Organians, the Metrons, Q himself. Every single one of them has proven that beings of such power view mortal civilizations as curiosities at best, or obstacles at worst. Why should Kal-El be different? Because he was mortal, Picard argued. He remembers being limited, being vulnerable. The beings you mentioned were always omnipotent. They never knew weakness. Kal-El does. That fundamental experience shapes his psychology differently. Nechayev's expression suggested she was unconvinced but willing to listen. Captain, the Federation Council is convening an emergency session to determine how to address the Kal-El situation. You are ordered to bring him to Starbase 74 where he will undergo comprehensive evaluation, psychological, ethical, and tactical. We need to understand what he is, what he wants, and what threat he might pose. With respect, Admiral, Kal-El is not a situation to be managed. He's a person with rights. He's a person with the capability to exterminate billions, Brackett countered. Rights must be balanced against security. That's not tyranny, Captain, it's pragmatism. The transmission ended, and Picard sat heavily in his chair. The burden of command had never felt heavier. He believed in Kal-El's fundamental goodness, but he also understood the Admiral's concerns. How do you integrate a god into a democracy? How do you trust that benevolence will last forever? A door chime interrupted his brooding. Come. Kal-El entered, and Picard noticed immediately that the Kryptonian's demeanor had changed. He moved with less confidence, his superposture suggesting not arrogance but burden. "Captain, I need to tell you something." "My enhanced hearing. I heard your conversation with Starfleet Command. I did not mean to eavesdrop, but your admirals were speaking loudly, and my senses are still difficult to control. I understand their concerns. And I think they may be right to fear me." Picard gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit, Kal-El. Please." The Kryptonian sat with exaggerated care, his super strength requiring constant vigilance to avoid accidentally destroying furniture. "Captain, I have been thinking about what I am. About what your universe has made me. On Krypton, I was unremarkable, a scientist's son with average intelligence and normal physical abilities. Here, I am a living weapon. Every conversation I have, I must consciously restrain myself to avoid crushing hands when I shake them. Every moment, I hear thousands of heartbeats, see through walls, feel the atomic vibrations of matter. It is isolating beyond measure." "Isolation does not equal danger," Picard observed. "No, but power without accountability does," Kal-El replied. "I've read your history, Captain. I've studied Federation principles and the Prime Directive. Your civilization has learned that power must be distributed through democratic institutions, not concentrated in individuals. Yet here I am, an individual with power that exceeds your entire government. How can I exist within your Federation without undermining everything it stands for?" Picard was quiet for a moment, considering. "Kal-El, may I share something personal? Several years ago, I was captured by the Borg. They assimilated me, turned me into a drone called Locutus. For weeks, I was their instrument, used to destroy Federation ships. To kill thousands of people including friends and colleagues. When I was recovered and the Borg implants removed, I had to face a profound question: was I still fit for command? Could I be trusted after having been so thoroughly compromised? What answer did you find?" Kal-El asked quietly. "That I was still Jean-Luc Picard. That my identity, my values, my character remained despite the violation. The Borg had used my body, but they hadn't changed who I fundamentally was. Kal-El, your power is extraordinary, but it doesn't define you any more than the Borg implants defined me. Your character, your choices, those are what matter. But how do I prove that to your Federation? How do I demonstrate that I can be trusted when the very existence of my power makes trust rational?" Before Picard could answer, the ship's red alert klaxons blared. Riker's voice came through the comm, "Captain, to the bridge. We're receiving a distress signal from a Federation colony, Ventax 2. They're under attack by unknown forces. We're the closest ship." Picard and Kal-El rushed to the bridge. The view screen showed a Federation colony world, lush, Earth-like, home to approximately 12,000 colonists. But the planet's orbital space was filled with hostile vessels, not Borg, not Romulan, but something else entirely. "Captain, I'm reading 6 attack ships of unknown configuration," Data reported. "They are bombarding the colony's primary settlement. Defensive shields are failing. Estimated time until complete shield collapse, 4 minutes. If shields fail, bombardment will render the settlement uninhabitable and kill all colonists. Hail them," Picard ordered. "All frequencies." The view screen shifted to show a reptilian humanoid with golden scales and predatory eyes. "Federation vessel, withdraw immediately. This world has been claimed by the Turek sovereignty. The colonists are trespassers on sovereign territory and will be removed by force. This is Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the USS Enterprise. Ventax 2 is a Federation colony, legally established 40 years ago. Under interstellar law. We recognize no Federation law," the Turek commander interrupted. "Our ancestors held this world 3,000 years ago before your species learned to speak. We have returned to reclaim what is ours. The colonists have 5 minutes to evacuate or they will be exterminated as invaders. This is not negotiable." The transmission ended. Picard turned to data. Analysis. Captain, the Turek vessels possess weapons capable of overwhelming our shields if they focus fire. In direct combat, we would likely sustain critical damage before defeating all 6 ships. Additionally, even if we succeed, the colony's shields will fail before we can destroy the attacking vessels. Estimated casualties, 11,800 colonists. Kal-El stepped forward. Captain, I can help. Let me protect the colony while you engage the Turek vessels. Kal-El, if you intervene, Starfleet Command will interpret it as you taking independent military action. It will confirm every fear they have about your willingness to operate outside Federation authority. Then let them be confirmed, Kal-El replied, his voice carrying absolute conviction. Captain, there are 12,000 people down there. Children, families, scientists who came here seeking peaceful lives. I will not debate philosophy and jurisdiction while they die. I am asking your permission as a courtesy, but I am going regardless. Picard faced an impossible choice. Allow Kal-El to save the colony and confirm Starfleet's worst fears about his autonomy, or follow protocol and watch thousands die while the Enterprise engaged in combat it might not win. He made the only choice his conscience allowed. Mr. Worf, open fire on the Turek vessels. Engage at will. And Kal-El, save them. Save everyone you can. Kal-El moved to the transporter room at super speed, materialized on Ventax 2's surface, and immediately flew toward the colony's primary settlement. The settlement was a typical Federation design, modular habitation units, central administration complex, agricultural zones, and a school that currently held 300 children taking shelter in the basement. The colony's shields flickered and failed just as Kal-El arrived. The Turek vessels, detecting the shield collapse, fired their weapons, kinetic bombardment projectiles that would impact with the force of tactical nuclear weapons. Kal-El intercepted them in midair. His hands caught projectiles traveling at supersonic speeds, compressed them to harmless scrap, and threw the remains into unpopulated terrain. 6 projectiles, then 12, then 20, the Turek vessels were firing everything they had, attempting to overwhelm the colony's defenses through sheer volume. And Kal-El caught them all. On the ground, colonists emerged from shelters, staring in awe at the figure in blue and red who hovered above their settlement, intercepting death with his bare hands. One projectile got past him, a targeting error that sent it toward the school where children sheltered. Kal-El moved faster than the human eye could track. He positioned himself between the projectile and the school building, took the full impact on his chest, and the resulting explosion, sufficient to destroy a city block, dissipated harmlessly against his invulnerable physiology. He didn't even move backward from the force. In orbit, the Enterprise engaged the Turek vessels with quantum torpedoes and phaser arrays. The battle was vicious, the Enterprise took significant damage, shields dropping to 41%, hull breaches on decks 9 and 12. But Picard's tactical expertise and the Enterprise crew's skill won through. 4 Turek vessels were destroyed, 2 retreated, and the immediate threat was neutralized. But the political damage was already done. Admiral Nechayev's face appeared on Picard's ready room screen 30 minutes later, her expression thunderous. Captain, I have just watched Kal-El single-handedly defend a Federation colony against military bombardment. In doing so, he revealed himself to have intervened in what the Turek sovereignty will now claim was an internal sovereign dispute. You have handed them a propaganda victory and demonstrated that the Federation harbors a being who operates as an independent military force. Admiral, Kal-El saved 12,000 lives. At what cost, Captain? Nechayev demanded. Every faction in the quadrant now knows that the Federation has a godlike protector who will intervene militarily whenever he deems it necessary. The Klingon will see him as a threat to their warrior honor. The Romulans will view him as a weapon to be acquired or destroyed. And worst of all, the Turek sovereignty, which we've been negotiating with for 3 years to avoid conflict, now has justification to claim the Federation uses superhuman enforcers to intimidate neighbors. So we should have let innocents die to preserve diplomatic relationships. Picard's voice carried rare anger. We should have followed established protocols instead of allowing an unaffiliated individual to take independent military action. Nechayev shot back. Captain, the Federation Council has made their decision. Kal-El is to be remanded to Federation custody immediately upon your arrival at Starbase 74. He will undergo comprehensive evaluation, and until that evaluation is complete, he is not to take any action without explicit Starfleet authorization. That is a direct order. Admiral, Kal-El is not a Starfleet officer. He's not bound by our chain of command. Then he's an unaligned entity with weapons of mass destruction capabilities, Nechayev replied coldly. And the Federation has protocols for handling such entities. Either he submits to our authority, or he is declared a rogue element and dealt with accordingly. Those are the only options. The transmission ended. Picard sat heavily, the weight of impossible decisions pressing down. He believed in Federation principles, democratic governance, rule of law, collective decision-making. But he also believed in individual rights, in the inherent dignity of persons, in the principle that power didn't negate personhood. Kal-El stood in the doorway. He'd heard everything again. Captain, I will submit to their evaluation. I do not wish to cause conflict between you and your superiors. If the Federation Council needs assurance that I can be trusted, I will provide it. Kal-El, they're not asking for assurance. They're asking for control. There's a difference. Perhaps control is appropriate, Kal-El replied quietly. Captain, I am one individual with the power to destroy planets. That is not democratic. That is not just. Perhaps I should submit to oversight, accept limitations, demonstrate that even beings like me can exist within civilized society without dominating it. Or perhaps, Data interjected, entering the ready room, the Federation should recognize that personhood transcends capability. Kal-El, you saved 12,000 lives today. You acted with restraint, precision, and compassion. Those actions demonstrate character. The Federation's response, demanding control rather than partnership, suggests fear is overriding principle. Data's right, Counselor Troy added, appearing beside the android. Captain, I've been monitoring Kal-El's emotional state since he awakened. He is genuinely kind, profoundly moral, and deeply concerned about the ethical implications of his power. The threat isn't Kal-El becoming a tyrant. The threat is the Federation's fear driving him away, ensuring we lose a valuable ally because we can't accept that goodness can coexist with godlike power. Picard stood, decision crystallizing. Then we need to prepare for Starbase 74 very carefully. Kal-El, you will submit to the Federation's evaluation. But you will do so as a free person cooperating voluntarily, not as a prisoner. Data, Counselor, I want comprehensive psychological profiles prepared, evidence that Kal-El's character is as extraordinary as his abilities. We're going to prove to the Federation Council that some individuals deserve to be trusted, even when that trust defies rational risk assessment. And if they reject that argument? Kal-El asked. Then we'll deal with that when it happens, Picard replied. But Kal-El, understand this. I will not allow the Federation to imprison or control you simply because they fear what you represent. You have my word on that. Thank you, Captain, Kal-El said quietly. But Captain, what if they're right to fear me? What if I am too dangerous to exist freely? Picard met his gaze steadily. Then you would be the first being in history to recognize their own danger and voluntarily seek limitation. That self-awareness, that humility despite godlike power, is precisely why I trust you. The truly dangerous beings never question their right to unlimited autonomy. You do. That's the difference. The Enterprise set course for Starbase 74, carrying within its hull a question that would challenge the Federation's founding principles. Could democracy survive a god? Should it try to control him? And if goodness and omnipotence could coexist, what did that say about the Federation's assumption that power inevitably corrupted? Captain Picard didn't have answers. But he knew that how the Federation treated Kal-El would define what they truly valued: security or principle, fear or trust, control or cooperation. The next few days would determine not just Kal-El's fate, but the soul of the Federation itself. Starbase 74 loomed ahead, a massive orbital facility that served as one of Starfleet's primary strategic installations. The Enterprise docked smoothly, but the atmosphere aboard was tense. Kal-El stood in his designated quarters, staring out at the stars, his superhearing picking up hundreds of conversations happening throughout the starbase. Many were about him. Godlike being, can't trust him. Saved an entire colony, hero. What if he decides he's above our laws? Federation's greatest asset or greatest threat. Every whispered conversation, every fearful speculation, every debate about his existence, he heard them all. The isolation was crushing. On Krypton, he'd been one among billions. Here, he was unique, powerful, and profoundly alone. A door chime interrupted his brooding. "Enter," he said, his voice carrying weariness that seemed impossible for someone so physically invulnerable. Captain Picard entered, followed by Counselor Troy and an unfamiliar woman in civilian clothing, tall, silver-haired, with eyes that suggested both wisdom and authority. "Kal-El, this is Ambassador T'Pel of Vulcan," Picard introduced. "She has been appointed by the Federation Council to conduct your evaluation. She is one of the Federation's most respected ethicists and has experience with powerful entities." Ambassador T'Pel raised her hand in the Vulcan salute. "Peace and long life, Kal-El of Krypton. I come not as judge, but as observer. The Federation Council seeks to understand you, your motivations, your ethics, your intentions. I have been chosen because Vulcan philosophy emphasizes logic over emotion, allowing assessment free from fear or prejudice." "Ambassador," Kal-El replied, attempting the salute and managing it gracefully despite never having seen it before. His superintelligence allowed rapid pattern learning. "I welcome your evaluation. I understand the Federation's concerns. I would have the same concerns if I encountered a being like myself." T'Pel's eyebrow rose fractionally, the Vulcan equivalent of surprise. "You acknowledge that you represent a legitimate concern. Fascinating. Most beings of power resist such characterization." "Most beings of power were raised with it," Kal-El replied. "They never knew limitation. I remember being ordinary, Ambassador. I remember what it meant to be vulnerable, to depend on others, to exist within a community as an equal. That memory shapes my perspective differently than it would for someone who was always omnipotent." "Logical," Pell acknowledged. "Kal-El, I would like to begin with a simple question. What do you want? Not what you believe others want from you, but what you personally desire for your future." Kal-El was silent for a long moment, his enhanced vision staring past the starbase walls to the stars beyond. "I want purpose, Ambassador. On Krypton, I was training to be a scientist like my father, someone who contributed to society through knowledge and discovery. Here, my scientific knowledge is 11,000 years obsolete. I cannot contribute intellectually. But I have these abilities, these powers that could help people. I want to use them to serve, to protect, to ensure that others don't suffer the losses I've endured. But I don't want to dominate, to control, to impose my will on civilizations that should determine their own destinies." "A contradiction," Pell observed. "How do you serve without controlling? How do you protect without imposing? Where is the ethical boundary between assistance and domination?" "I don't know," Kal-El admitted. "That's the question I've been struggling with since I understood what I've become. Ambassador, I could rebuild entire civilizations. I could move planets, redirect stars, terraform worlds to support life. But should I? At what point does my help create dependency? When does my protection become a cage that prevents societies from developing the strength to protect themselves?" "You have identified the fundamental paradox of benevolent omnipotence," T'Pel said. "The Prime Directive was established precisely because the Federation learned that intervention, even well-intentioned intervention, often causes more harm than good. Yet you are not the Federation. You are an individual. Does the Prime Directive's logic apply to persons, or only to governments? I believe it applies to anyone with disproportionate power, Kal-El replied. The Prime Directive exists because power imbalance creates dependency and stifles natural development. Whether that power is wielded by a government or an individual seems irrelevant. The harm is the same. Counselor Troy leaned forward, her empathic abilities focused. Kal-El, I'm sensing profound conflict in you. You want to help, but you're afraid of helping. You have power beyond measure, but you fear using it. That internal contradiction, that restraint despite capability, is remarkable. It's also exhausting, Counselor, Kal-El replied. Every moment, I hear disasters I could prevent. People crying for help across this entire sector. Ships in distress. Colonies facing famine or disease. Natural disasters that I could stop with minimal effort. But if I respond to every crisis, I become a crutch. Civilizations stop developing their own solutions because they rely on me. Where do I draw the line between help and harm? Where would you draw it, if the choice were yours? Picard asked quietly. I would respond to immediate, life-threatening emergencies where no other help is available, Kal-El answered after consideration. Natural disasters, ship failures in deep space, situations where people will die without intervention. But I would not interfere in political disputes, cultural conflicts, or situations where societies need to find their own solutions even if those solutions are imperfect. I would be a last resort, not a first response. Ambassador T'Pel made notes on her PADD. A measured approach. Logical limitations voluntarily embraced. Kal-El, I have reviewed Captain Picard's logs regarding your confrontation with the Borg and your defense of Ventax 2. In both situations, you acted to protect life. You used minimum necessary force. You avoided casualties even among hostile forces. These actions suggest character consistent with Federation values. And yet Starfleet Command fears me, Kal-El observed. Starfleet Command fears what you could become, Pell corrected. They have encountered godlike beings before, entities like Q, the Dowd, the Organians. In every case, these beings operated according to their own incomprehensible morality, often treating mortal civilizations as curiosities or obstacles. You represent something different, a being of comparable power but with mortal origins and comprehensible ethics. That novelty creates uncertainty. So how do I prove I'm trustworthy? Kal-El pressed. What test would satisfy the Federation Council that I can coexist with civilized society without dominating it? That is the question I must answer, Pell replied. But Kal-El, understand that trust is not granted through single proof. It is built through consistent behavior over time. You cannot prove your trustworthiness in days or weeks. You can only demonstrate it through years of choices that align with stated values. I may not have years, Kal-El said quietly. Captain Picard's conversations with Starfleet Command suggest they want immediate resolution. Either I submit to their control, or I am declared a rogue element. Before T'Pel could respond, the starbase emergency klaxons blared. Admiral Nechaev's voice came through on ship-wide comm, all senior personnel to operations. We have a situation. The Romulans have made contact. Operations Center was controlled chaos when they arrived. The main viewscreen showed 3 Romulan warbuds decloaking simultaneously, Derridex-class vessels, each carrying enough firepower to challenge a dozen Federation starships. Admiral Nechaev stood at the command center, her expression grim. The Romulans are hailing us. They're demanding we surrender Kal-El for scientific study or face military action. They claim his technology, his biological enhancements, represent strategic assets that cannot be allowed to remain under Federation control. They want to dissect him, Picard said flatly. Study his physiology, attempt to replicate his abilities. Undoubtedly, Nechaev confirmed. Captain, the Romulan commander is insisting on speaking directly with Kal-El. She wants to make her case personally. The view screen shifted to show a Romulan female in commander's uniform, sharp features, calculating eyes, and an expression that mixed respect with predatory interest. I am Commander Sela of the Romulan Star Empire. You are Kal-El of Krypton. Your capabilities have been observed and analyzed. The Romulan Star Empire recognizes that beings of your power cannot be permitted to operate under Federation authority. It creates unacceptable strategic imbalance. Commander Sela, Kal-El replied, his voice steady, I am not a weapon to be controlled by any government, including yours. You are a biological phenomenon that transcends conventional military capability, Sela countered. The Federation found you by accident. They have no right to monopolize what you represent. The Romulan Empire offers you a choice: come with us voluntarily for study and potential integration into our society, or we will take you by force. You cannot take me by force, Kal-El said simply. Your weapons cannot harm me. Your ships cannot contain me. And I will not allow you to attack this starbase or the Federation simply because you fear what I represent. Sela's smile was cold. We are not without resources, Kal-El. Your stasis pod, the one the Federation discovered, we have retrieved fragments from its original location. Those fragments contain crystalline material that generates red sun radiation. We have synthesized larger quantities. If you refuse to cooperate, we will deploy red sun radiation projectors that will depower you, render you vulnerable, and allow us to capture you for study. Kal-El's expression didn't change, but those with enhanced perception, like Data, noticed his posture shift fractionally. You would start a war with the Federation to acquire me? We would prevent strategic imbalance, Sela corrected. The Federation with Kal-El as an ally or asset represents existential threat to Romulan security. We cannot permit that situation to continue. You have 1 hour to decide, come voluntarily, or we will take you by force and accept whatever casualties result from that action. The transmission ended. Operations fell silent. Admiral Nechayev turned to Kal-El, her expression mixing frustration and grudging respect. They're calling our bluff. If we refuse to surrender you, they'll attack. If we fight, we'll win eventually, but casualties will be in the thousands. All to protect one individual. Then don't protect me, Kal-El said quietly. Admiral, I will not be the cause of war between the Federation and the Romulan Empire. I will surrender myself to prevent bloodshed. Absolutely not, Picard interjected. Kal-El, if the Romulans acquire you, they will experiment on you, attempt to replicate your abilities, possibly create an army of Kryptonian enhanced warriors. That outcome is unacceptable. More unacceptable than thousands of Federation casualties. Kal-El challenged. Captain, I appreciate your principles, but I will not allow innocents to die on my behalf. The Romulans may be able to depower me, but they cannot replicate Kryptonian biology without understanding the underlying genetics. I will surrender, allow them their studies. And escape when opportunity presents itself. A risky strategy, Ambassador T'Pel observed. The Romulans are expert geneticists. They may learn more than you anticipate. Then that is a risk I accept, Kal-El replied. But I will not be responsible for starting a war. Data stepped forward, his positronic brain clearly processing complex calculations. Kal-El, I believe there is a third option. The Romulans assume you will react defensively, either flee, surrender, or fight. They have prepared for those responses. However, they may not have prepared for a diplomatic solution. What kind of diplomatic solution? Nechayev asked skeptically. Transparency, Data replied. Kal-El, what if you voluntarily submitted to comprehensive scientific study, not by the Romulans, but by an independent panel including Federation, Romulan, and neutral party scientists? You would demonstrate your physiology openly, answer all questions about your capabilities, and remove the mystery that makes you seem like a strategic asset to be monopolized. You want me to reveal everything about my biology to multiple governments including hostile ones? Kal-El asked. I want you to eliminate the strategic value of capturing you, Data clarified. If your capabilities are openly documented and understood, if all major powers have access to that information, then no single faction gains advantage by possessing you. You become valuable as an individual and ally, but not as a secret weapon to be hoarded or stolen. Kal-El was silent, considering. Finally, he nodded. It's logical. And it aligns with my desire for transparency. But Ambassador Nechayev, would the Federation agree to share such information with the Romulans? If it prevents war, yes, Nechayev decided. But Kal-El, you understand what you're proposing? Every faction in the quadrant will know your strengths and weaknesses. They'll know about kryptonite, red sun radiation, any vulnerability you possess. You'll give them the keys to defeating you. I am giving them the information to understand I'm not a threat to be preemptively eliminated, Kal-El corrected. And yes, they'll know my vulnerabilities. But knowing vulnerabilities and exploiting them are different things. The Romulans have red sun technology now. If they wanted to attack me, they already could. Transparency doesn't increase my danger, it decreases the fear that drives aggressive action. A bold strategy, Pell observed. Logical, but requiring courage. You would voluntarily make yourself vulnerable to prevent conflict. That action speaks more strongly to your character than any words could. Picard activated the comm, hail the Romulan flagship. Inform Commander Sela that we have a counterproposal. When Sela's face reappeared on the view screen, her expression suggested skepticism. The Federation wishes to negotiate. Interesting. What are your terms? We propose scientific transparency, Picard announced. Kal-El will voluntarily submit to comprehensive study by an independent scientific panel including Federation, Romulan, and neutral party researchers. All findings will be shared equally among participants. The Romulan Empire will gain full understanding of Kal-El's capabilities and limitations. In exchange, you will cease hostile action and recognize Kal-El's autonomy as an independent entity allied with the Federation but not controlled by it. Sela considered, her tactical mind clearly evaluating the proposal. And if we simply attack now, overpower him with red sun radiation, and conduct our studies without sharing the results? Then you face the full response of Starfleet, a being whose capabilities you acknowledge exceed conventional military force, and the moral condemnation of the Federation Council, Picard replied. You may win that confrontation eventually, but at what cost? How many Romulan lives are worth gambling against uncertain victory? You assume we care about Romulan casualties. I assume you care about strategic outcomes, Picard corrected. What serves the Empire better, cooperation that grants you the knowledge you seek, or conflict that might grant you that knowledge at the cost of revealing Romulan military capabilities to the Federation and depleting resources that could be used elsewhere? Sela was silent for exactly 8.3 seconds. Then her expression shifted to something approaching respect. Captain Picard, you argue like a Romulan. Very well. The Empire accepts your proposal. But we have conditions. First, the neutral party scientists must include representatives we approve, no Federation stooges. Second, the studies must be genuinely comprehensive, not sanitized propaganda. Third, Kal-El must submit voluntarily and answer all questions honestly. Can you guarantee these conditions? Kal-El stepped forward. Commander Sela, I guarantee them personally. I will answer every question, submit to every test, and cooperate fully with the scientific panel. You will learn everything about my capabilities and vulnerabilities. And in exchange, you will recognize that I am not a weapon to be controlled, but a person deserving of autonomy. Pretty words, Sela replied. We shall see if your actions match them. The Empire agrees to this unusual arrangement. But Kal-El, understand, if you prove deceitful, if this transparency is merely theater, the Romulan Star Empire will respond accordingly. Understood, Kal-El replied. I am incapable of deception on this matter. You will learn exactly what I am and what I can do. I trust that knowledge will reduce fear rather than increase it. The transmission ended. Admiral Nechayev turned to Kal-El with an expression mixing respect and concern. You just volunteered to let hostile powers study your weaknesses. That's either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish. Perhaps both, Kal-El acknowledged. But Admiral, I learned something from studying Federation history. Your greatest strength isn't your technology or military, it's your principles. Transparency, cooperation, the belief that understanding reduces conflict. I'm choosing to trust those principles, even when applying them to myself creates personal risk. Ambassador T'Pel raised her hand in the Vulcan salute. Kal-El of Krypton, you have demonstrated wisdom that many beings with far less power fail to achieve. You recognize that vulnerability shared builds trust, while invulnerability hoarded breeds fear. I will recommend to the Federation Council that you be granted autonomous status as an independent ally rather than a managed asset. Your actions today have proven your character more eloquently than any evaluation could. Thank you, Ambassador, Kal-El said quietly. But I suspect the real test is just beginning. Revealing my vulnerabilities to multiple governments is one thing. Learning to live with the consequences of that revelation will be another. Captain Picard placed a hand on Kal-El's shoulder. Then you won't face those consequences alone. The Federation stands with you, not as controllers or jailers, but as allies. You've proven today that godlike power can coexist with democratic principles, not through submission, but through voluntary restraint and transparent cooperation. That's a lesson the galaxy needs to learn. As scientific teams from 3 governments assembled to study the most powerful being any of them had encountered, one truth became clear: Kal-El's greatest power wasn't his strength, speed, or invulnerability. It was his willingness to be vulnerable when vulnerability served peace. And that power, the courage to trust despite having every reason to fear, was the one capability no amount of study could replicate. The scientific symposium convened in Starbase 74's largest conference facility, a vast chamber designed for interstellar diplomatic summits, now converted into a collaborative research center. The room's atmosphere crackled with tension and intellectual anticipation as scientists from 3 civilizations assembled: Federation xenobiologists and physicists, Romulan geneticists and weapons specialists, and neutral observers from the Vulcan Science Academy. Kal-El stood at the center on a raised platform, surrounded by every scanning device 3 advanced civilizations could deploy. Medical tricorders, Romulan bioscanners, Vulcan psychoanalyzers, subspace field detectors, quantum resonance imagers, all focused on him simultaneously, painting a comprehensive picture of Kryptonian biology that had remained mystery for 11 millennia. Dr. Beverly Crusher led the Federation contingent, her medical expertise complemented by Dr. Torek from the Daystrom Institute. The Romulan team was headed by Sub-Commander Tkara, a geneticist whose reputation for brilliance was matched only by her ruthlessness. The Vulcan observers included Dr. Selek, whose 1,000-year lifespan gave him perspective on biological diversity across epochs. Remarkable, Dr. Torek breathed, studying his displays. His cellular structure isn't just enhanced, it's fundamentally reconfigured. Every cell functions as both biological tissue and energy storage mechanism. He's essentially a living battery that converts electromagnetic radiation into kinetic, thermal, and structural reinforcement at the quantum level. Impossible according to conventional biology, Tkara observed, her Romulan skepticism evident. No organic system should be able to process energy at those efficiency levels without catastrophic thermal breakdown. Yet here he stands, processing more power than a starship's warp core without apparent heat dissipation. The heat is dissipated, data interjected from his observer position. Kal-El's metabolism operates in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Excess thermal energy is shunted into subspace, where it dissipates harmlessly. His biology has evolved, or been engineered, to utilize spatial dimensions beyond the conventional 3 as part of normal metabolic function. Evolved? Tkara's tone carried doubt. No natural evolution produces capabilities like these. Kal-El, was Kryptonian biology artificially enhanced? Kal-El considered how to answer. Not in recent history. But our legends spoke of the first epoch, a time when Krypton's civilization was guided by beings we called the Guardians. They supposedly shaped Kryptonian evolution, preparing us for some future purpose we never understood. Most scientists dismissed those legends as mythology. Now, I wonder if they were historical record. So you may be the product of genetic engineering so ancient it predates recorded history, Beverly mused. That would explain why your capabilities don't align with natural evolutionary pressures. You were designed, but by entities whose motives remain unknown. Let us focus on observable phenomena rather than archaeological speculation, Dr. Selleck suggested with Vulcan pragmatism. Kal-El, please demonstrate your flight capability while we monitor energy dynamics. Kal-El rose slowly from the platform, his body defying gravity through no visible means of propulsion. Sensors showed complex quantum field manipulations, his biology creating localized spacetime distortions that effectively made him frictionless relative to gravitational fields. He's manipulating gravitons, Torek exclaimed. Biological graviton manipulation. That shouldn't be possible without massive energy expenditure and specialized equipment. He's doing it as naturally as we breathe. Next test, Tkara announced, her scientific curiosity overriding Romulan suspicion. Kal-El, we wish to measure your strength. We have prepared a test apparatus, a hydraulic press. Calibrated to measure up to 500,000 metric tons of force. Please apply pressure until you reach your maximum. Kal-El descended to the testing apparatus, a massive device that occupied an entire section of the chamber. He placed his hands on the resistance plates and began to push. The hydraulic systems groaned, safety mechanisms engaged, and the digital readout climbed, 100,000 tons. 250,000 tons. 400,000 tons. Increasing, Kal-El said calmly. The readout continued climbing, 500,000 tons. 600,000 tons. The apparatus is at maximum capacity, Torek reported. Kal-El is still applying pressure without apparent strain. We cannot measure his upper limits with available equipment. Then we know his strength exceeds 500,000 tons and is likely orders of magnitude higher, Beverly summarized. Kal-El, do you know your maximum? No, Kal-El admitted. I've never encountered resistance I couldn't overcome. On Krypton, I was normal, I knew exactly what I could and couldn't lift. Here, everything feels weightless. It's disorienting. Disorienting to have no physical limitations, Dr. Selleck observed. A unique psychological burden. Let us proceed to sensory capabilities. Kal-El, describe what you perceive in this room. Kal-El closed his eyes, his other senses engaging fully. I hear 147 heartbeats throughout this starbase, each unique in rhythm and pattern. I can differentiate species by cardiovascular signatures, 89 humans, 31 Vulcanoids including Romulans and Vulcans, 18 Andorians, 9 other species. I hear computer systems throughout the station, each producing distinct electromagnetic signatures. I hear subspace communication traffic from ships within 2 light-years. I hear everything. He opened his eyes, which briefly glowed with a faint golden light. My vision operates across multiple spectra. I see infrared, the thermal patterns of everyone present. Ultraviolet, the fluorescent markers on Dr. Crusher's medical instruments. X-rays, I can see through solid matter, observe the skeletal structures of everyone in this room, the internal mechanisms of your equipment. At higher focus, I can perceive atomic structures, molecular bonds, even quantum probability clouds. Quantum perception, Torek whispered. He can observe phenomena at the Planck scale. That means he's processing information at computational densities that exceed our most advanced AI systems. How do you manage the cognitive load? Tkara demanded. Processing that volume of sensory data should overwhelm any organic neural architecture. It nearly does, Kal-El admitted. I've developed filtering techniques, consciously suppressing most sensory input to focus on relevant data. But the filters slip when I'm stressed or emotional. In those moments, I'm aware of everything simultaneously. It's overwhelming to the point of pain. A significant vulnerability, Tkara noted, making annotations on her PADD. Sensory overload could be weaponized. Overwhelming stimuli across multiple spectra might incapacitate you. Perhaps, Kal-El agreed. But you're also revealing my vulnerabilities to everyone here. That was the agreement, complete transparency. Which brings us to your known weaknesses, Beverly said, pulling up comparative data. We've identified two primary vulnerabilities, red sun radiation and a crystalline substance you call kryptonite. Let's address them systematically. A Romulan scientist activated a red sun radiation emitter, carefully calibrated to non-lethal levels. The crimson light bathed Kal-El, and the change was immediately apparent. His perfect posture faltered slightly. His breathing, normally so controlled it was nearly imperceptible, became audible. His strength, tested again on a smaller apparatus, measured at merely 10 times human baseline. Fascinating, Dr. Selleck observed. Red sun radiation doesn't harm you, it simply reverts you to baseline Kryptonian physiology. Under Krypton's original sun, you would have been essentially human equivalent. The yellow sun enhancement is completely reversible. And exploitable, Tkara added. Any faction wishing to neutralize you need only deploy red sun generators. You become manageable, vulnerable to conventional weapons. Yes, Kal-El confirmed, his voice slightly strained under the red sun's influence. But maintaining red sun fields requires significant energy and specialized equipment. It's not a practical weapon for most situations. The red sun emitter deactivated, and Kal-El's power returned within seconds, his cells rapidly reabsorbing yellow sun radiation from the room's standard lighting. The transformation is rapid, Beverly noted. Minutes to depower, seconds to recharge. That suggests his cellular batteries maintain charge but stop replenishing under red sun conditions. Now for the more dangerous test, Tkara announced. We have synthesized kryptonite based on samples found in your stasis pod's original location. This will be genuinely painful, Kal-El. Do you consent? Kal-El steeled himself. I consent. But minimal exposure, please. I've never experienced kryptonite's effects consciously. I don't know my tolerance. A small crystalline fragment, glowing with sickly green luminescence, was brought out in a lead-lined containment field. When the field lowered, exposing Kal-El to direct kryptonite radiation, his reaction was immediate and visceral. He collapsed to his knees, his invulnerable body suddenly racked with pain. His skin, normally perfect, showed visible veins darkening with radiation poisoning. His strength failed entirely, he couldn't even stand. And his expression showed agony that even his Kryptonian emotional control couldn't mask. Enough. Beverly ordered after exactly 3.2 seconds. The kryptonite was recontained. Kal-El remained on his knees, breathing hard, his body already beginning to heal but the memory of pain clearly traumatic. That was. Kal-El managed, worse than I imagined. It wasn't just physical pain. It was existential. Like my cells were remembering Krypton's destruction, reliving it at the molecular level. Kryptonite is irradiated fragments of your homeworld, Dr. Torek explained. Its radiation carries quantum signatures from Krypton's explosion. Your biology recognizes it as familiar but catastrophically wrong, like exposure to antimatter versions of your own molecular structure. It doesn't just harm you, it contradicts your fundamental existence. A weapon of genocide, Tkara observed coldly. Kryptonite would be lethal to any surviving Kryptonians, but harmless to all other species. It's the perfect assassination tool, targeted, effective, and leaving no collateral damage. Which is exactly why we must ensure knowledge of its synthesis doesn't spread beyond this room, Picard interjected from his observer position. Kal-El has voluntarily revealed his vulnerabilities in service of peace. Using that knowledge for assassination would be the ultimate betrayal of trust. The Romulan Empire makes no promises regarding future actions, Tkara replied. We came for knowledge. We are receiving it. What we do with that knowledge serves Romulan interests. Then you prove why transparency is dangerous, Kal-El said, having recovered enough to stand. I trusted that revealing my vulnerabilities would reduce fear and prevent conflict. If you use that knowledge to create weapons against me, you validate every concern about sharing information with potential enemies. We are enemies, Kal-El, Tkara stated flatly. The Federation and Romulan Empire have been adversaries for over 2 centuries. Cooperation on this symposium doesn't change that reality. You are naive if you believed otherwise. Perhaps, Kal-El acknowledged. But naivety that attempts peace is preferable to cynicism that guarantees conflict. I chose transparency knowing the risks. I still believe it was the right choice. Ambassador T'Pel, who had been observing silently, finally spoke. This symposium has revealed much about Kal-El's capabilities and vulnerabilities. But it has also revealed something more significant, his character. He voluntarily subjected himself to painful testing. He revealed information that could be used against him. He maintained composure and dignity despite being discussed as a specimen rather than a person. These actions demonstrate psychological stability and ethical commitment rarely seen in beings of such power. She turned to address the assembled scientists and observers. I recommend to the Federation Council that Kal-El be granted autonomous status as an independent ally. He has proven through transparency and voluntary vulnerability that he can be trusted with godlike power. The question is whether we can be trusted to honor the courage he has shown. Before anyone could respond, alarms blared throughout the starbase. A junior officer burst into the symposium chamber. Captain Picard. Emergency transmission from Deep Space Nine. They're under attack by an unknown force. Casualties are mounting. They're requesting immediate assistance. Picard's command instincts engaged instantly. Specifications. Unknown vessels, unknown weapons technology. But Captain, the attackers are broadcasting a message. They're calling themselves the Disciples of Zod, and they're demanding the Federation surrender Kal-El immediately. They claim he is a traitor to Krypton and must face Kryptonian justice. The symposium chamber fell silent. Every eye turned to Kal-El, whose expression had transformed from diplomatic calm to profound dread. Zod, Kal-El whispered. General Zod. He was Krypton's military commander, a brilliant strategist who believed Krypton's science council was leading our world to destruction. He attempted a coup to take control. My father testified against him. Zod was sentenced to the Phantom Zone, a dimensional prison, along with his most loyal followers. If they've escaped, then there are more Kryptonians in this universe, Tkara finished. Kryptonians with military training, no loyalty to Federation principles, and a vendetta against you personally. Kal-El, you are not the only one of your kind. You never were. Kal-El's face showed an emotion he hadn't expressed since awakening, fear. Not fear for himself, but fear of what Kryptonian military doctrine unleashed on an unprepared universe might mean. Captain Picard, Kal-El said urgently, Deep Space Nine is in mortal danger. Zod's followers were Krypton's elite warriors, trained from childhood in combat tactics that make Starfleet security look like children playing with toys. If they have yellow sun powers like mine, if they've been free long enough to master their abilities, then Deep Space Nine doesn't stand a chance. Then we must go immediately, Picard decided. Enterprise crew to battle stations. Set course for Deep Space Nine, maximum warp. And Kal-El, you're coming with us. If these disciples of Zod want Kryptonian justice, they'll face it. But not the version they expect. As the symposium broke up in controlled chaos, as scientists scrambled to secure data and ships prepared for emergency departure, one truth crystallized: the Federation had just learned that Kal-El wasn't unique. There were other Kryptonians in this universe. And if Kal-El represented the best of what Kryptonian civilization could be, compassionate, ethical, restrained, then General Zod's disciples represented the worst, warriors without mercy, power without conscience, and the absolute certainty that might made right. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when gods went to war. And the fragile peace that transparency had built was about to be tested by the one force even godlike power couldn't defeat, ideology backed by equal strength. The Enterprise streaked through space at maximum warp, pushing its engines beyond recommended safety limits. In the ready room, Captain Picard convened an emergency briefing with his senior staff and Kal-El, whose expression carried the weight of civilizations. "Tell us about General Zod," Picard requested. "Everything. His capabilities, his tactics, his psychology. If we're facing Kryptonian military forces, we need to understand what that means." Kal-El stood before the assembled officers, his usual calm replaced by visible tension. General Zod was Krypton's supreme military commander for 20 years. He was brilliant, a strategic genius who won 3 colonial wars and established Krypton's dominance over our sector. But he was also ruthless. He believed the Science Council's policies were weakening Krypton, making us vulnerable. When my father Jor-El presented evidence of our planet's imminent destruction, Zod saw an opportunity. He attempted a coup, Picard surmised. Yes. Zod believed that if the Council wouldn't act to save Krypton, he would seize control and implement evacuation protocols by force. He gathered his most loyal followers, the military elite, and attempted to overthrow the government. My father and other scientists opposed him. The coup failed, barely. Zod and his disciples were sentenced to the Phantom Zone as punishment. What is the Phantom Zone? Data asked, his positronic brain cataloging new information. A dimensional prison, Kal-El explained. Kryptonian scientists discovered a pocket dimension where time passes differently. Criminals sentenced experience their punishment as eternal, subjective centuries while objective years pass. Zod was sentenced to what should have been thousands of years of imprisonment. If he's escaped, if his followers are with him. How many followers? Riker pressed. 23 at the time of sentencing. Krypton's finest warriors, special forces operatives, tactical commanders, weapons specialists. Each one trained since childhood in Kryptonian martial arts and military doctrine. Under a yellow sun, with powers like mine, they would be. Kal-El struggled to find adequate words. "Captain, I'm self-taught. I learned to use my abilities through trial and error over a matter of days." Zod's disciples trained for decades in Kryptonian combat techniques. They know exactly how to use super strength, super speed, and heat vision as coordinated weapons. And they have no moral qualms about collateral damage. Meaning? Worf growled. Meaning if they want to destroy Deep Space Nine, they'll do it efficiently. Klingon warriors value honorable combat. Romulans value strategic advantage. Zod's disciples value only victory. They will kill everyone on that station without hesitation if it serves their tactical objectives. Beverly Crusher pulled up medical data from the symposium. But they have the same vulnerabilities you do. Red sun radiation, kryptonite. We can exploit those weaknesses. If we can deploy them, Kal-El cautioned. Zod is a military genius who has had time to study this universe. He'll have developed countermeasures, defensive tactics. Captain, you need to understand, Zod believes he's saving Krypton's legacy. In his mind, I'm a traitor who sided with the Science Council against military necessity. He'll want to capture me, put me on trial for treason, and execute me as an example. The attack on Deep Space Nine is bait to draw me out. Then we don't take the bait, Picard decided. Kal-El, you'll remain on the Enterprise while we... With respect, Captain, that won't work, Kal-El interrupted. Zod will escalate. He'll attack civilian targets, kill innocents, until I respond. I know his psychology. He's forcing confrontation because he wants a public execution, proof that Kryptonian military authority supersedes Federation protection. I have to face him. Alone? Picard asked pointedly. No, Kal-El replied, and his expression showed determination. With Starfleet support. Captain, I learned something during the symposium. I don't have to face every threat alone. The Federation has resources, technology, tactical expertise. If we coordinate, my capabilities combined with your strategic thinking, we might actually have a chance. Might, Riker repeated skeptically. Zod has 23 warriors with capabilities equivalent to mine, Kal-El said bluntly. In any fair fight, I lose. But Commander, Starfleet doesn't fight fair. You fight smart. That's our advantage. Data's console beeped with incoming transmission. Captain, we are receiving an update from Deep Space Nine. The station has sustained 37% damage. Casualties, 43 dead, 112 wounded. The attacking forces have ceased hostilities and are broadcasting a message. Audio only. It is, addressed to Kal-El. Play it, Picard ordered. The voice that emerged was deep, commanding, carrying authority that expected obedience. It spoke in Kryptonian, but Data's universal translator rendered it in Federation standard. Kal-El, son of Jor-El, you are hereby summoned to face charges of treason against Krypton. You collaborated with the Science Council to undermine military authority. You allowed our world to die rather than support necessary action. Now you hide among primitives, sharing Kryptonian secrets with inferior species. You disgrace the House of El and all Krypton's legacy. Present yourself within 6 hours, or I will begin executing the inhabitants of this station. 1 per hour until you comply. The first execution occurs in 59 minutes. Do not test my resolve. I am General Zod, rightful authority of the Kryptonian people, and I do not make idle threats. The transmission ended. The ready room was silent until Counselor Troy spoke, her empathic abilities focused despite the distance. Captain, I'm sensing from Kal-El, guilt. He feels responsible for those deaths. I am responsible, Kal-El replied quietly. 43 people died because Zod is using them to get to me. If I don't respond, more will die. Captain, I request permission to travel ahead to Deep Space Nine and surrender myself to Zod's custody. Absolutely not, Picard said firmly. We don't negotiate with terrorists, and we don't surrender innocent beings to face show trials and execution. Those people aren't innocent to Zod, Kal-El argued. In his view, the Federation are collaborators harboring a traitor. He's applying Kryptonian military law, and under that law, he has legitimate authority. Captain, I understand you want to protect me, but Zod will kill everyone on Deep Space Nine to prove his point. I can't allow that. Then we need a tactical solution that doesn't involve your execution, Riker stated. Data, what are our options? Data processed for 1.7 seconds. Limited, Commander. The disciples of Zod possess capabilities that exceed our weapons' effectiveness. However, we have one significant advantage: preparation time. The Enterprise will arrive at Deep Space Nine in 42 minutes. We can use that time to deploy countermeasures. What kind of countermeasures? Worf demanded. Red sun radiation generators throughout Deep Space Nine, Data suggested. If we can flood the station with red sun wavelengths, we neutralize Zod's forces' superhuman abilities. They become vulnerable to conventional weapons. Zod would detect the generators and destroy them before we activated them, Kal-El cautioned. He's too experienced to fall for obvious traps. We need something subtler. Beverly leaned forward, medical instinct engaging. What if we don't make it obvious? Kal-El, your cells absorb yellow sun radiation constantly, right? What if we contaminated the station's lighting systems with red sun wavelengths? Not enough to immediately depower anyone, but enough to slowly drain their energy reserves over time. Like radiation poisoning, subtle, cumulative, undetectable until symptoms manifest. Biological warfare, Kal-El said, his tone uncertain. Doctor, that approach feels dishonorable. Honor is a luxury you can't afford when facing an enemy who has none, Worf replied, his Klingon pragmatism overriding idealism. Kal-El, you said Zod's disciples have no moral qualms about collateral damage. Why should we handicap ourselves with honor when they won't reciprocate? Because if I abandon my principles to defeat Zod, he wins regardless of the battle's outcome, Kal-El replied. He believes might makes right, that military necessity justifies any action. If I prove him correct by using dishonorable tactics, I validate his philosophy. Then we need an approach that's both effective and ethical, Picard concluded. Kal-El, you'll go to Deep Space Nine as Zod demands. But not to surrender, to negotiate. You'll buy us time to evacuate civilians and prepare defensive measures. Data, work with Dr. Crusher on the Red Sun radiation strategy, but make it a failsafe, not our primary tactic. Mr. Worf, coordinate with Deep Space Nine security on conventional defense protocols. And Kal-El, when you face Zod, remember, you're not alone. The Federation stands with you. 39 minutes later, the Enterprise dropped out of warp at the edge of the Bajoran system. Deep Space Nine hung in space, its distinctive Cardassian Federation hybrid architecture showing visible damage, hull breaches, darkened sections, emergency force fields sealing major ruptures. Hail the station, Picard ordered. Priority channel to Commander Sisko. The view screen showed Deep Space Nine's operations center in emergency mode. Commander Benjamin Sisko stood at the command console, his expression mixing frustration, determination, and the controlled fear of someone facing impossible odds. Captain Picard, glad you could make it, Sisko said, his voice carrying the weight of command during crisis. I'm transmitting tactical data now. 23 hostile entities, all possessing capabilities equivalent to Kal-El's based on your symposium data that was shared with us. They've taken up positions throughout the station, they're not damaging critical systems anymore, just waiting. Like they're daring us to attack. Commander Sisko, this is Kal-El, the Kryptonian said, stepping into the viewscreen's pickup range. I'm coming to the station. Zod wants me, let him have me. But I need you to evacuate all non-essential personnel first. Civilian families, wounded, anyone who can't fight. Get them off the station before I surrender. You're not surrendering, Sisko replied firmly. Captain Picard briefed me on the situation. We're not handing you over to face execution. But Kal-El, I've got to be honest, we're outmatched. My security teams can't touch these Kryptonians. Our weapons are useless. We're holding position, but only because they're letting us. Then we change the tactical equation, Kal-El decided. Commander, I'm beaming directly to your operations center. We'll coordinate face-to-face. Before Picard could object, Kal-El was already moving to the transporter room. He materialized on Deep Space 9 seconds later, the station's scarred interior evidence of the Disciples' destructive capabilities. Sisko met him at the transporter pad. Kal-El, welcome to Deep Space Nine. Wish the circumstances were better. Major Kira Nerys, my first officer. Chief Miles O'Brien, Operations. And this is Odo, our security chief. The shapeshifter called Odo studied Kal-El with evident suspicion. So you're the reason we're hosting a Kryptonian invasion. Wonderful. Any brilliant plans for resolving this, or should we just evacuate and let you and Zod destroy each other? Odo, Sisko warned, but Kal-El raised a hand. No, he's right to be angry. This is my fault. Zod is here because of me. But Constable Odo, I promise you, I will resolve this without allowing Deep Space Nine to become collateral damage. I just need time to understand Zod's positioning and tactics. He's in the promenade, Major Kira reported, pulling up station schematics. taking up a very public position. He wants to be seen, wants confrontation. The other disciples are spread throughout the station, guarding critical systems, monitoring civilian areas. It's a classic hostage situation, except the hostages are an entire space station. How many civilians remaining aboard? Kal-El asked. Approximately 800, O'Brien replied. We've evacuated families and wounded, but we've got Starfleet personnel, Bajoran militia, civilian merchants and residents who refuse to leave their businesses. And Odo's right, if you and Zod fight at full power inside this station, the structure won't survive. Then I won't fight at full power, Kal-El decided. I'll negotiate. Zod wants a trial. I'll give him one. Public, formal, following Kryptonian military law. I'll accept his authority to judge me if he agrees to conduct the trial according to proper legal protocols. That buys us time and removes his justification for killing hostages. You're volunteering for a rigged trial that will end in your execution, Kira observed skeptically. I'm volunteering for a delay that allows civilian evacuation and gives Starfleet time to develop tactical solutions, Kal-El corrected. Major, I don't intend to die today. But I also won't allow innocents to die in my place. This is the best compromise available. Sisko studied Kal-El for a long moment. Captain Picard was right about you. You've got the power to level this station, but you're choosing negotiation over violence. That takes more courage than fighting. All right, Kal-El. We'll support your play. But understand, if this goes sideways, if Zod breaks his word, we're prepared to flood the station with red sun radiation and engage with conventional weapons. You won't be fighting alone. Thank you, Commander. Kal-El took a steadying breath. Then let's go meet General Zod and see if Kryptonian military law still values due process. Or if Zod has become the tyrant my father feared he would be. They proceeded to the promenade, Deep Space Nine's commercial and social center, now transformed into a makeshift courtroom. Zod had positioned himself at the center, floating 3 meters above the deck in a deliberate display of power. He wore Kryptonian military armor, black with silver accents, covered in symbols that denoted his rank and accomplishments. His face was harsh, scarred from ancient battles, with eyes that held absolute certainty. Behind Zod stood 3 of his disciples, a woman with cold, calculating features, a massive male warrior whose presence radiated violence, and a younger Kryptonian who watched everything with tactical assessment. Kal-El, Zod's voice boomed across the promenade, augmented by superbreath to carry to every corner of the station. At last, the traitor presents himself. I had wondered if you would hide behind your primitive allies or face Kryptonian justice with whatever dignity your family name still holds. Kal-El descended to the promenade floor, standing at equal height rather than matching Zod's elevated position. A deliberate choice, he wouldn't cede psychological dominance. General Zod, I'm here. You demanded a trial. Let's conduct it properly, according to Kryptonian military code. State your charges, present your evidence, allow me defense. If I'm truly guilty of treason, prove it legally. Zod's expression showed surprise, then grudging respect. You invoke military law. Interesting. Very well, Kal-El. I, General Druzod, Supreme Military Commander of Krypton, do hereby charge you with the following crimes: collaboration with the Science Council to undermine military authority during planetary crisis. Failure to support necessary measures to save Kryptonian civilization. And most damningly, disclosure of Kryptonian secrets to alien species, compromising our technological advantage and dishonoring our legacy. How do you plead? Kal-El stood tall. Not guilty to all charges. And General, I invoke the right to trial by combat, ancient Kryptonian law that predates the Science Council. If you truly believe I'm a traitor, prove it in single combat. Winner determines truth. The promenade fell absolutely silent. Even Zod seemed taken aback. Then he smiled, a predator's smile. You challenge me to Corrigar? Trial by combat. Kal-El, I have 40 years of military training. You have days of fumbling with abilities you barely understand. This will not be a fight. It will be an execution that you volunteered for. Perhaps, Kal-El acknowledged. But General, if you're so certain of victory, you have nothing to lose by accepting. And if you refuse, everyone present will know that the great General Zod fears fair combat with an untrained scientist's son. Is that the legacy you want? Zod's eyes blazed, literally, heat vision barely restrained. Then he laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. Very well, Kal-El, Korrigar it is. Single combat, to submission or death. Winner's verdict on all charges becomes law. We fight in 1 hour, allowing both combatants time to prepare. And Kal-El? When I defeat you, when I prove your treachery through superior might, remember, you chose this. You could have died quickly. Now you'll die slowly, in pain, as a lesson to any other Kryptonians who might consider betraying military authority. As Zod and his disciples withdrew to prepare, Commander Sisko pulled Kal-El aside. Are you insane? You just volunteered for single combat against a military genius with decades more experience. I bought us an hour, Kal-El replied quietly. Use it, Commander. Evacuate everyone you can. Because whether I win or lose, this station is about to become a battlefield. And I'd. The hour passed with agonizing slowness. Deep Space Nine's promenade had been cleared of all non-combatants, its shops and restaurants sealed, its elegant architecture about to witness violence on a scale the station was never designed to contain. Commander Sisko had evacuated another 300 civilians during the reprieve, leaving only essential Starfleet personnel and those who absolutely refused to leave. In a commandeered quarters, Kal-El prepared for combat. Data had beamed over from the Enterprise with tactical analysis compiled from every second of Zod's appearance, breaking down the General's body language, stance, and implied combat capabilities. Zod positions himself with military precision, Data explained, holographic displays showing micro-movements and positioning. His weight distribution suggests training in Kryptonian martial arts called Horokanu, a combat system designed for low-gravity environments that emphasizes momentum manipulation and strike angles that bypass conventional defenses. Under yellow sun conditions with superhuman speed and strength, this style becomes exponentially more effective. In other words, he's going to destroy me, Kal-El summarized. Statistically, your probability of victory is 11.3%, Data confirmed with android bluntness. However, that calculation assumes conventional combat. If you adapt unpredictably, utilize your environment, and exploit Zod's psychological assumptions about your inexperience, probability increases to 27.6%. Still terrible odds. But not impossible ones, Captain Picard interjected, entering with Commander Sisko. Kal-El, I've faced seemingly unbeatable opponents before. The key is recognizing that strength isn't everything. Zod expects you to fight like a warrior. Disappoint him. Fight like a scientist, use analysis, adaptation, unconventional thinking. My father was a scientist, Kal-El said quietly. He believed knowledge could solve any problem. But General, what knowledge defeats 40 years of combat experience? The knowledge that you're not alone, Sisko replied. Kal-El, I've configured Deep Space Nine's internal systems to respond to specific Kryptonian phrases. If you speak certain trigger words during combat, the station will execute tactical responses, localized gravity fluctuations, emergency bulkhead closures, even brief red sun radiation pulses. We can't sustain red sun fields long enough to fully depower you or Zod, but we can create momentary vulnerabilities. Kal-El's expression showed surprise and gratitude. You're weaponizing the station to help me? We're evening the odds, Sisko corrected. Zod thinks this is single combat. Let him think that. But Starfleet doesn't believe in fair fights, we believe in winning with minimum casualties. Use every advantage available. Counselor Troy entered, her empathic presence immediately soothing the room's tension. Kal-El, I wanted to give you something before you face Zod. A reminder of why you're fighting. She handed him a PADD displaying images, the 12,000 colonists from Ventax 2 that he'd saved, the Enterprise crew that he protected from the Borg, the Deep Space Nine personnel whose lives depended on his success. These people are alive because of your choices, Troy said gently. Because you value life over power, protection over domination. Zod has strength and skill, but he's forgotten why power matters. You haven't. That's your advantage, not physical, but moral. Remember that when facing him. Kal-El studied the images, each face a reminder of what he'd chosen to become. Not a warrior, not a weapon, but a guardian. Someone who used power to serve rather than to rule. Thank you, counselor, he said quietly. I needed that reminder. Worf appeared in the doorway, carrying something wrapped in cloth. Kal-El, I have studied your upcoming combat. By Klingon standards, what you face is glorious, a battle against superior opponent where victory seems impossible. Such battles are how legends are made. Whether you win or die, you will do so with honor. But Klingon wisdom also teaches, honor without victory is merely expensive death. Therefore, he unwrapped the cloth, revealing a Klingon DK Tog blade, ceremonial, but functional. This blade has been in my family for 7 generations. It cannot harm Zod, whose skin is as invulnerable as yours. But it can remind you that even gods bleed when facing warriors who refuse to yield. Kal-El accepted the blade with reverence. Commander Worf, I cannot use a weapon against Zod. Korrigar, trial by combat, requires unarmed confrontation. Then carry it as symbol, Worf replied. Sometimes the weapon we carry is less important than the courage it represents. The hour expired. Kal-El proceeded to the promenade, his Enterprise allies forming an honor guard, not interfering, but bearing witness. Hundreds watched via viewscreens throughout the station and aboard the Enterprise. This wasn't just a fight between two Kryptonians. It was a test of principles, military might versus moral conviction, domination versus service. Zod waited at the promenade center, his disciples positioned at strategic points around the perimeter. He'd removed his armor's upper section, revealing a physique sculpted by decades of training, every muscle optimized for combat, every movement suggesting lethal precision. Kal-El, Zod announced formally, his voice carrying to every corner of the station. We stand before witnesses to engage in Korrigar, trial by combat as prescribed by ancient Kryptonian law. The victor's judgment shall be absolute. The defeated shall accept their fate without protest. Do you understand and accept these terms? I understand and accept, Kal-El replied, his voice steady despite the fear churning in his gut. General Zod, I face you not as a traitor, but as someone who believes Kryptonian legacy should be measured by compassion, not conquest. May the worthy prevail. May the strong prevail, Zod corrected. And Kal-El? I am very, very strong. The combat began without warning. Zod moved at super speed, closing the distance between them in microseconds. His fist drove toward Kal-El's face with force that would shatter mountains. Kal-El barely managed to raise his arms in defense. The impact sent him flying backward through 2 bulkheads, his invulnerable body creating Kryptonian-shaped holes in Deep Space Nine's reinforced structure. Kal-El shook off the disorientation and flew back to the promenade. Zod was already there, floating casually, not even breathing hard. Disappointing, Kal-El. I expected at least minimal resistance. Shall we continue, or would you prefer to surrender and accept execution immediately? I'm just getting started, Kal-El replied, though his jaw ached despite his invulnerability. Zod's strike had been that powerful. He launched himself at Zod, fists extended, using his flight to build momentum. But Zod simply sidestepped at super speed, grabbed Kal-El's cape, and used it to redirect his momentum directly into the promenade floor. The deck plating cracked under the impact. You fight like a brawler, Zod observed, his tone almost disappointed. No technique, no discipline. Just raw power clumsily applied. Kal-El, your father was brilliant in science, but he clearly failed to teach you the warrior's way. Allow me to educate you. Zod's next combination was devastating. 3 strikes in rapid succession, each one targeting pressure points in Kryptonian anatomy that even superdense physiology couldn't fully protect. Solar plexus, throat, temple. Kal-El reeled, his vision blurring, pain registering despite his body's incredible durability. Feeling it now? Zod taunted. That's Horokanu, combat techniques perfected over millennia by Krypton's greatest warriors. Every strike concentrates force at quantum levels, bypassing even invulnerable skin to cause internal trauma. You cannot win this fight, Kal-El. You lack the training, the experience, the discipline. Surrender. Never, Kal-El gasped, and he spoke one of the trigger phrases Sisko had given him: Kryptonian honor demands perseverance. Deep Space Nine's gravity generators responded instantly, creating localized gravitational anomalies that pulled Zod off balance. For just a moment, the general's perfect stance faltered. Kal-El used that moment, not to strike, but to create distance, flying to the opposite end of the promenade to reassess. Zod smiled coldly. Clever. Using your environment as weapon. I approve, it shows tactical thinking. But Kal-El, do you really believe station systems can defeat me? Watch. Zod's eyes blazed red. Heat vision, concentrated thermal energy, lanced across the promenade, striking the gravity generator controls that Sisko had modified. The systems exploded, eliminating that tactical advantage. Your allies' tricks won't save you, Zod declared. This is single combat. Face me properly, or die a coward. Kal-El forced himself to think. Direct combat was suicide, Zod was simply too skilled, too experienced. But data had suggested unpredictability, unconventional tactics. What would his father do? Jor-El had been a scientist, someone who solved problems through analysis and innovation rather than force. General Zod, Kal-El called out, buying time to formulate strategy. You claim I betrayed Krypton. But didn't you betray Krypton first? You attempted a military coup, tried to overthrow legitimate government. Who's the real traitor? I tried to save our world. Zod roared, his composure cracking for the first time. The Science Council was paralyzed by bureaucracy and cowardice. Jor-El warned them, showed them evidence of planetary instability, and they dismissed him. I would have forced evacuation, saved millions. Your father stopped me, and 8 billion Kryptonians died because of his choice. My father tried to save Krypton through science and reason, Kal-El replied. You tried to save it through violence and domination. Even if you'd succeeded, General, what would you have saved? A civilization ruled by fear and military authority? That's not Krypton, that's a parody of everything our people valued. Our people valued survival. Zod countered. Everything else, science, culture, philosophy, means nothing if the species goes extinct. I understood that. Your father didn't. And now, Kal-El, you repeat his mistakes. You side with aliens, share our secrets, weaken Kryptonian supremacy. You are exactly the traitor I accused you of being. I'm not a traitor, Kal-El said quietly. I'm the last chance for Kryptonian legacy to mean something beyond conquest and war. General, our people are gone. Their cities, their art, their achievements, all dust. The only thing that remains is how we, the survivors, choose to honor their memory. I choose to honor them by proving Kryptonians can be more than warriors. What do you choose? Zod's expression hardened. I choose victory. I choose strength. And I choose to end this debate. The general moved at full super speed, so fast that even Kal-El's enhanced perception struggled to track him. Zod appeared behind Kal-El, grabbed him in a crushing hold, and flew upward at maximum velocity. They crashed through Deep Space Nine's upper pylons, into open space, where Zod released Kal-El and immediately fired heat vision at maximum intensity. The beam struck Kal-El's chest, and for the first time, he felt genuine pain from thermal energy. Zod's heat vision was more concentrated, more powerful, decades of training allowing him to focus stellar-level energy into beams that could cut through anything. Kal-El tried to dodge, to evade, but Zod was relentless. Heat vision pursued across space, each beam forcing Kal-El to maneuver desperately. He was being herded, driven into a tactical disadvantage, and there was nothing he could do about it. Then Kal-El remembered something Data had said, Zod expects you to fight like a warrior. Disappoint him. Fight like a scientist, Instead of dodging the next heat vision beam, Kal-El flew directly into it. The pain was excruciating, even invulnerable skin had limits when facing concentrated energy of that magnitude. But Kal-El endured, flying through the beam until he was close enough to grab Zod's head and forcibly redirect his heat vision toward Deep Space Nine's docking ring where the Enterprise was berthed. "What are you doing?" Zod demanded, struggling to break free. "You'll destroy your ally's ship." "No," Kal-El replied grimly. "You will. And everyone will see that the great General Zod cares so little for innocent life that he'd incinerate a starship to win a personal duel." Zod's heat vision cut off immediately. He couldn't allow that perception, couldn't be seen as recklessly destroying Federation vessels. His entire argument relied on claiming moral authority, presenting himself as Krypton's legitimate defender. Being exposed as someone willing to cause massive collateral damage would undermine that authority. "Clever," Zod admitted, breaking free from Kal-El's grip. "You're learning. Using psychology as weapon, exploiting my need to maintain appearances. Perhaps you're more like your father than I thought, manipulative, willing to use any advantage. But Kal-El, psychology won't defeat superior skill." They clashed again in open space, two Kryptonians trading blows that would destroy planets, moving at speeds that made them appear as blurs of motion against the stars. Kal-El was learning, adapting, using what little combat instinct he possessed to survive. But survival wasn't victory, and Zod was methodically wearing him down. Aboard the Enterprise, Data monitored the battle with his positronic precision. "Captain, Kal-El is losing. His defense is deteriorating, his reaction time slowing. At current trajectory, he will be unable to continue combat in approximately 4.3 minutes. Can we intervene?" Picard asked, though he already knew the answer. "Negative. Any weapon we deploy would be ineffective against Kryptonian physiology. And interference would violate the trial by combat protocols that Kal-El agreed to. He is, legally and practically, on his own." Counselor Troi watched the viewscreen, her empathic abilities stretched across the void. "Captain, I'm sensing something from Kal-El. Not defeat, determination. He's planning something. He's waiting for the right moment." In space, Zod drove Kal-El back toward Deep Space Nine's outer docking ring. "It's over, Kal-El. You fought better than I expected, but the outcome was never in doubt. Accept your defeat. Accept that military authority supersedes scientific idealism. Accept that might, properly applied, makes right." "Never," Kal-El gasped, his body battered, his costume torn. "Because General, you're wrong. Might doesn't make right. It only makes you powerful. And power without purpose, without compassion, without restraint, that's not strength. That's just violence wearing a uniform. Then die believing your philosophy," Zod declared, drawing back his fist for the final strike, a blow that would drive Kal-El through Deep Space Nine's hull and out the other side. "And when you're gone, I'll establish proper Kryptonian authority in this universe. Military order, strategic dominance, the legacy our people deserved." Zod's fist descended. Kal-El didn't dodge. Instead, he caught it. For the first time in the battle, he caught Zod's strike cleanly, his hand wrapping around the general's fist with strength he hadn't displayed before. Zod's eyes widened with surprise. Kal-El shouldn't have the power remaining to stop that strike. But Kal-El had been holding back. Conserving strength. Waiting for this exact moment when Zod committed everything to a finishing blow. "You were right about one thing, General," Kal-El said, his voice steady despite the pain. "I'm not a trained warrior. But you know what I am. A survivor. Someone who's learned that winning isn't about being stronger, it's about being more determined to protect what matters." Kal-El pulled Zod close, wrapped him in a crushing embrace, and flew at maximum speed directly into Deep Space Nine's fusion reactor core, the one place on the station that even Kryptonian invulnerability might struggle to survive. The station's engineering core loomed ahead, its reactor containing forces equivalent to a small star. Kal-El and Zod crashed through multiple bulkheads, alarms blaring, emergency systems screaming warnings. And then they were inside, surrounded by fusion plasma, temperatures exceeding millions of degrees, pressure that would atomize conventional matter. Even Kryptonian biology had limits. Even invulnerability could be overwhelmed. Both combatants screamed as fusion energy washed over them. Kal-El's grip never loosened. He would win or they would both die, but he would not allow Zod to walk away and threaten innocent lives ever again. For 37 seconds, they endured hell itself. Then the reactor's emergency shutdown engaged, Chief O'Brien manually triggering containment protocols to prevent station destruction. The fusion reaction ceased. The temperature dropped. And when the plasma cleared, 2 Kryptonians remained, both barely conscious, both burned despite their invulnerability, both having pushed themselves beyond any reasonable limit. But Kal-El's grip remained locked. He'd held on. He'd endured. And most importantly, he'd survived while neutralizing Zod's threat. "The trial," Kal-El gasped through damaged lungs that were already healing, "is over. I submit, we both submit. Draw. No victor. No defeated. And therefore, no verdict. Zod, your charges are unproven. I am free." Zod tried to respond, but his body finally failed him. Decades of imprisonment in the Phantom Zone followed by immediate combat had taken their toll. His consciousness faded, and for the first time in his military career, General Zod fell unconscious. Kal-El released him, his own body shutting down from trauma. His last conscious thought was gratitude that no one else had died, that the station was intact, that he'd proven strength could coexist with mercy. Then darkness claimed him, and he knew nothing more. Kal-El woke in Deep Space Nine's infirmary, his Kryptonian biology having repaired catastrophic damage that would have killed any other being. Dr. Bashir stood over him, medical scanner in hand, his expression mixing medical fascination with profound relief. "Welcome back," Bashir said. "You've been unconscious for 14 hours. Your cellular regeneration is remarkable, injuries that should have been fatal were completely healed within the first 6 hours. The burns from the reactor core, the internal trauma from Zod strikes, even neurological damage from oxygen deprivation, all repaired at accelerated rates. Kal-El, your biology is extraordinary." "Zod?" Kal-El asked, his voice rough but functional. "Stable, also recovering. He's in a secured medical bay under red sun radiation to prevent him regaining full power before we determine what to do with him. His disciples attempted a rescue, but Commander Sisko deployed the red sun generators throughout the station. Without their powers, they surrendered rather than face conventional weapons they couldn't resist. All 23 are in custody." Kal-El sat up slowly, testing his restored strength. "The trial by combat, I declared it a draw. According to Kryptonian law, that means no verdict can be rendered. Zod's charges against me are unresolved. Conveniently, the Federation doesn't recognize Kryptonian military law as having jurisdiction here," Commander Sisko said, entering the infirmary with Captain Picard. "Kal-El, what you did was either incredibly brave or monumentally reckless. You flew into a fusion reactor core. With another person. While that reactor was active. Do you have any idea how close you came to destroying this station and killing everyone aboard? Approximately 0.03 seconds from critical containment failure, Kal-El replied. Chief O'Brien's emergency shutdown saved us all. I'm sorry for the risk, Commander. But Zod was going to kill me, then establish his vision of Kryptonian authority throughout this quadrant. I couldn't allow that. So you chose mutual destruction as the alternative? Picard asked, his tone mixing reproof with understanding. Kal-El, that was a gamble of cosmic proportions. It was also the only tactical option that prevented Zod's victory while honoring the trial by combat protocols, Kal-El replied. Captain, I learned something during my scientific symposium, that transparency and vulnerability can be strengths rather than weaknesses. I applied that lesson to combat. Zod expected me to fight for survival. I fought for mutual defeat instead, taking away his ability to claim victory. It was unconventional. It was brilliant, Data interjected, appearing in the doorway with his characteristic precise movements. Kal-El, your strategy violated conventional combat doctrine but achieved optimal outcomes. Zod neutralized, disciples captured, station intact, minimal casualties. By standard metrics, you won despite declaring the contest a draw. But what do we do now? Sisko pressed. We have 24 Kryptonian military prisoners with godlike capabilities under yellow sun radiation. We can keep them depowered with red sun generators, but that's not a permanent solution. They're sentient beings, not animals to be caged. Eventually, we'll need to determine their status, prisoners of war, refugees, what? They should face trial, Kal-El said firmly. Proper trial under Federation law for their attack on Deep Space Nine. 43 people died, Commander. More than 100 were injured. The disciples must answer for those deaths. Agreed, Sisko replied. But Kal-El, you understand that putting them on trial means revealing publicly everything about Kryptonian capabilities, vulnerabilities, and the threat they represent. The galaxy will learn that there are 24 beings with power to destroy planets. That knowledge will create fear, possibly panic. Then we must demonstrate that power can be constrained by law, Picard argued. That even godlike beings are subject to justice. Gentlemen, the Federation has a unique opportunity here. We can show the galaxy that we treat all sentient beings equally under law, neither giving preferential treatment nor excessive punishment based on capability. That's the principle our civilization was founded upon. Counselor Troi entered, her empathic presence immediately calming the room's tension. Kal-El, how are you feeling? Emotionally, I mean. You faced someone from your own culture, your own species. That must have been profoundly difficult. It was like fighting a dark reflection of what I could become, Kal-El admitted quietly. Zod and I have the same capabilities, the same heritage. The difference is philosophy. I choose service, he chooses domination. But Counselor, I understand his perspective. He genuinely believes military authority is necessary for Kryptonian survival. He's not evil, he's ideologically committed to a worldview that I find abhorrent. That's a mature assessment, Troi observed. Many would simply label him a villain. You recognize the complexity of his motivations even while opposing his actions. That wisdom, that nuance, is exactly what this situation needs. Admiral Nechayev's face appeared on a wall-mounted viewscreen. Captain Picard, Commander Sisko, I've been briefed on the situation. The Federation Council is convening an emergency session to address the Kryptonian situation. Kal-El, your actions have created both crisis and opportunity. Crisis, because 24 superbeings now require containment and adjudication. Opportunity, because you've demonstrated that Kryptonian power can be defeated through courage and unconventional tactics. I'm authorizing formation of a special tribunal to address the disciples' status. You'll be called to testify. I'll cooperate fully, Admiral, Kal-El replied. But I want to request something. Allow me to speak with Zod privately. He and I need to Have a conversation, Kryptonian to Kryptonian, about what our legacy should be in this universe. Nechayev considered. That's highly irregular. He's a hostile combatant who attempted to kill you hours ago. He's also the only other being in this universe who understands what it means to be the last of Krypton, Kal-El countered. Admiral, I don't expect to change his mind. But I need to try. If there's any chance of rehabilitating Zod and his disciples, it begins with dialogue. Rehabilitation? Sisko repeated skeptically. Kal-El, these are military zealots who killed 43 Federation citizens without hesitation. What makes you think they can be rehabilitated? Because I've read your history, Commander, Kal-El replied. The Federation rehabilitated former Maquis resistance fighters, integrated them into Starfleet. You've negotiated peace with the Klingon despite centuries of warfare. You believe in redemption, in the possibility that people can change. Why should that belief not extend to Kryptonians? Because Kryptonians have godlike power, Nechayev said bluntly. Rehabilitation requires trust. Trust requires vulnerability. The Federation cannot afford to be vulnerable to beings who could destroy Earth with their bare hands. Then you're applying different standards based on capability rather than character, Kal-El observed. Admiral, isn't that the definition of discrimination? Judging beings by their power rather than their actions and potential for change. The view screen showed Nechayev's internal struggle. Finally, she nodded. Very well. You'll have 30 minutes with Zod under heavy security, monitored by multiple sensors, with security teams standing by to flood the room with red sun radiation if hostilities resume. But Kal-El, if he attacks you, if this conversation goes wrong, the consequences will be on your head. Understood? Understood, Admiral. Thank you. 20 minutes later, Kal-El entered a secured conference room. Where General Zod sat in restraints designed for Kryptonian physiology, carbon nanotube bindings reinforced with force fields, under constant red sun radiation that kept his powers suppressed. The general looked diminished without his abilities, still physically imposing, but mortal, vulnerable, constrained. Kal-El, Zod greeted, his voice carrying none of its earlier commanding presence. Come to gloat over your victory? There was no victory, Kal-El replied, sitting across from him. We both lost, General. You lost your freedom. I lost the hope that Kryptonian survivors could coexist peacefully. We're both prisoners now, you literally, me figuratively. This universe fears us, constrains us, because we represent power they can't control. Then you understand my position, Zod said, leaning forward despite his restraints. The Federation will never truly accept us. Oh, they'll be polite, they'll offer us rights and protections, but always with the understanding that they reserve the right to kill us if we become inconvenient. Is that the legacy you want for Krypton? To be tolerated rather than respected? I want Krypton's legacy to be compassion, General. Science, art, philosophy, everything our civilization achieved beyond military conquest. You want to preserve Krypton's strength. I want to preserve Krypton's soul. Souls don't survive without strength to protect them, Zod countered. Kal-El, your father was brilliant but naive. He believed reason could solve every problem, that knowledge was sufficient defense against hostile forces. Krypton died because the Science Council couldn't accept that sometimes, violence is the answer. I tried to save them through military action. Your father stopped me. 8 billion people died. Tell me, who was right? Kal-El was silent for a long moment. Neither of you, General. My father was wrong to dismiss your concerns about the Council's inaction. You were wrong to attempt a military coup. The right answer was somewhere between your positions, decisive action guided by ethical principles. But neither of you could compromise, could acknowledge the other might have partial truth. Your ideological rigidity killed Krypton as surely as the geological instability. Zod's expression showed surprise, then something approaching respect. You criticize your father. Acknowledge I had valid concerns. That's unexpected. Most would defend Jor-El's memory absolutely. My father was human, capable of mistakes despite his brilliance, Kal-El replied. And you, General, are also capable of being partially right while fundamentally wrong. You correctly identified the Council's failure to act. You incorrectly concluded that military dictatorship was the solution. Both things can be true simultaneously. Nuance, Zod said, and his tone suggested he was tasting an unfamiliar concept. You think in shades of gray rather than absolute certainty. Kal-El, that approach is weak. Commanders must have absolute conviction, must never doubt their righteousness. Uncertainty kills soldiers. And absolute certainty kills civilizations, Kal-El countered. General, look where your conviction brought you. You're imprisoned, your disciples are captured, and the Federation is debating whether to execute you all as threats to galactic security. Was that the outcome you intended? Did absolute certainty serve you well? Zod's jaw tightened. I would make the same choices again. Military necessity justifies any action. That's not negotiable. Then you'll die in a Federation prison, Kal-El said bluntly. Because they're offering a choice, General. Rehabilitation, integration into society under strict oversight, the chance to prove Kryptonians can coexist peacefully with other species. Or execution as unrepentant hostile forces. Those are the only options. Which do you choose? Neither, Zod spat. I refuse to accept Federation authority over Kryptonian affairs. I refuse to submit to oversight by primitives who achieved space flight while Krypton was already building interdimensional technology. And I refuse to pretend that power should bow to weakness simply because weakness has moral authority. Then you choose death, Kal-El said quietly. And you'll take 23 disciples with you, Kryptonians who might have lived, who might have found purpose beyond warfare, who might have honored our civilization's memory in ways that mattered. General, is your pride worth their lives? For the first time since the conversation began, Zod hesitated. The disciples, they followed me willingly. They believed in military authority, in Kryptonian supremacy. If I order them to resist Federation authority, they will. If I order them to die rather than submit, they will. But Kal-El, if I ordered them to cooperate, to accept rehabilitation, that would be betraying everything we fought for. Or it would be adapting to new circumstances, Kal-El suggested. General, you're a brilliant tactician. You know when to retreat, when to change strategies, when to accept that current approaches aren't working. Apply that tactical thinking to this situation. You cannot defeat the Federation through force, they outnumber you thousands to one, and they have weapons specifically designed to neutralize Kryptonian abilities. Fighting guarantees death. But cooperating, at least temporarily, guarantees survival. And survival means future opportunities. Zod's eyes narrowed. You're suggesting I feign cooperation while planning future action. I'm suggesting you genuinely cooperate while keeping options open, Kal-El corrected. General, the Federation isn't your enemy. They're potential allies if you can accept that alliance doesn't require submission. They have resources, technology, strategic reach across quadrants. Kryptonian capabilities combined with Federation infrastructure could accomplish extraordinary things. But only if you can subordinate your need for dominance to the principle of cooperation. And if I can't? Zod challenged. If my nature, my training, my convictions, prevents me from accepting equality with species I know to be inferior, then you'll die, Kal-El replied simply. And Krypton's military legacy dies with you. But General, consider this, you claim Kryptonians are superior. Prove it. Not through conquest, but through excellence. Show the Federation that Kryptonian discipline, Kryptonian strategic thinking, Kryptonian capabilities can be assets rather than threats. Earn respect through demonstration rather than demanding it through intimidation. Zod was silent for exactly 47.3 seconds, long enough that Kal-El wondered if he'd pushed too hard, demanded too much philosophical flexibility from someone whose entire identity was built on absolute certainty. Then, slowly, Zod spoke. "Your father would be proud of you, Kal-El. You've developed his gift for persuasive argument while avoiding his naivety about power. Very well. I will consider cooperation. Not as surrender, but as tactical adaptation to unfavorable circumstances. I will order my disciples to accept Federation oversight, to participate in rehabilitation programming, and to demonstrate that Kryptonians can control their capabilities. In exchange for..." Kal-El prompted, knowing Zod well enough to recognize a negotiation. "In exchange for genuine opportunity," Zod replied. "Not imprisonment disguised as rehabilitation, but real chance to prove ourselves valuable to this Federation. Military consulting, strategic planning, protection services, ways to contribute that utilize our strengths without requiring us to pretend we're not warriors. And Kal-El, if the Federation betrays this agreement, if they imprison us despite cooperation, I reserve the right to resume hostilities." "Fair terms," Kal-El acknowledged. "I'll present them to Captain Picard and Commander Sisko. But General, understand, this is probation, not partnership. You'll need to earn trust. Through consistent behavior over time. Years, possibly decades. Can you accept that timeline?" "I've spent subjective centuries in the Phantom Zone," Zod replied. "I understand patience." "Very well, Kal-El. I will attempt this, cooperation. But know that I do so not from conviction, but from tactical necessity. If circumstances change, so will my strategy." "Honestly spoken," Kal-El said, standing. "General, I don't expect you to change your core beliefs overnight. I only expect you to control your actions. That's all the Federation requires, not ideological conversion, but behavioral compliance. Can you provide that?" Zod met his eyes. "I am a soldier, Kal-El. I follow orders when the chain of command is clear. Establish that chain, demonstrate Federation authority is legitimate rather than merely convenient, and I will comply. But Kal-El, the moment I perceive weakness, the moment I conclude this cooperation is merely extended imprisonment, I will act. Be certain your Federation understands that." "They will," Kal-El confirmed. "General, this conversation was more productive than I hoped. Thank you for considering alternatives to perpetual conflict. Don't mistake tactical flexibility for philosophical conversion," Zod warned. "I still believe military authority should supersede civilian oversight. I still believe strength justifies action. But I'm willing to defer those beliefs temporarily in service of Kryptonian survival. That's the most you'll get from me." "It's enough," Kal-El replied. "For now, it's enough." As Kal-El left the conference room, Captain Picard waited in the corridor. "Well? Did your conversation accomplish anything?" "Zod has agreed to conditional cooperation," Kal-El reported. "He'll order his disciples to participate in rehabilitation programming if the Federation provides genuine opportunities for them to contribute meaningfully. Military consulting, strategic planning, protection services. He wants to prove Kryptonian value. Through demonstration rather than conquest." "And you trust him?" Picard asked skeptically. "Not remotely," Kal-El admitted. "But I trust that he's tactical enough to recognize cooperation serves his interests better than death. Captain, Zod is fundamentally a soldier. Soldiers need purpose, structure, chain of command. The Federation can provide those things if you're willing to try. And if he betrays that trust, you'll have Red Sun technology and kryptonite as failsafes. What do you have to lose by attempting rehabilitation? Besides everything if he's deceiving us?" Picard replied dryly. But his expression showed consideration. "Very well. I'll present his terms to Starfleet Command. But Kal-El, you've just taken responsibility for 24 of the most dangerous beings in the galaxy. If this goes wrong, if Zod or his disciples harm innocents, that blood will be partially on your hands. I know, Kal-El said quietly. But Captain, isn't that always the burden of those with power? The responsibility for consequences, the weight of choices that affect thousands. I became powerful accidentally. The least I can do is use that power to create opportunities for peace rather than accepting inevitability of conflict. Picard studied him for a long moment. You know, when we first found you in that stasis pod, I wondered what kind of being would emerge. A god, perhaps. Or a monster. What I didn't anticipate was finding someone profoundly, remarkably human in the ways that matter most. Compassion, wisdom, the willingness to take responsibility for others' welfare. Kal-El, you've taught the Federation something important about power, that it's meaningless without purpose beyond itself. I learned that from you, Captain, Kal-El replied. From you and your crew. You showed me that strength without community is just isolation, that power without cooperation is merely force. The Federation made me more than Kryptonian biology ever could. You made me something worth. 3 months had passed since the Battle of Deep Space Nine. The Federation's Special Tribunal on Kryptonian Integration had conducted exhaustive hearings, reviewed thousands of hours of testimony, and wrestled with questions that had never before confronted galactic civilization. How do you integrate gods into democracy? Can beings of unlimited power be trusted to honor voluntary limitations? And most fundamentally, did capability determine rights, or did rights exist independent of power? Kal-El stood before the Federation Council chamber on Earth, the first time he'd visited humanity's homeworld since awakening in this universe. The chamber was vast, filled with representatives from dozens of member worlds, all gathered to hear the tribunal's final recommendations regarding the Kryptonian situation. Ambassador T'Pel presented the findings with Vulcan precision. The tribunal has evaluated 24 Kryptonian individuals over a 12-week period. Our assessment methodology included psychological evaluation, ethical philosophy testing, behavioral observation under controlled conditions, and extensive interviews with each subject. Additionally, we monitored their interactions with Federation personnel, their responses to authority, and their capacity for empathy and moral reasoning. She pulled up holographic displays showing comprehensive data. Our findings divide the Kryptonian population into 3 categories. Category 1, Kal-El of the House of El. This individual has demonstrated exceptional moral character, voluntary restraint despite godlike capabilities, and genuine commitment to Federation principles. Recommendation: grant full autonomous status as independent ally with unrestricted freedom of movement and action. He has earned trust through consistent behavior. Kal-El felt relief wash over him, though he maintained diplomatic composure. Full autonomous status meant the Federation would stop monitoring his every action. Would treat him as a sovereign ally rather than a managed asset. Category 2, General Druzod and 7 of his disciples, T'Pel continued. These individuals possess concerning ideological commitments to military authority and strength-based hierarchies. However, they have demonstrated capacity for behavioral control, tactical flexibility, and willingness to defer their philosophical preferences when circumstances require cooperation. Recommendation: conditional integration under strict oversight. They will be assigned Federation liaisons, required to obtain authorization before taking significant actions, and subject to immediate containment if they violate agreed protocols. This category represents calculated risk. They may yet prove valuable allies or confirm themselves as threats requiring permanent constraint. Zod, watching via secured transmission from his current location on a Federation rehabilitation facility, allowed himself a thin smile. Conditional integration wasn't freedom, but it was survival and opportunity. He could work within those constraints while proving Kryptonian value to this new civilization. Category 3, 16 disciples, T'Pel concluded, her expression carrying rare Vulcan regret. These individuals have proven psychologically incompatible with Federation principles. They refuse behavioral modification, resist all oversight, and explicitly state their intention to resume hostile action the moment opportunity presents. Despite months of rehabilitation attempts, they demonstrate no capacity for adaptation. Recommendation: permanent containment under red sun radiation in maximum security facility designed for Kryptonian physiology. They will remain imprisoned indefinitely unless future psychological evaluation shows meaningful change. The council chamber erupted in debate. Some members argued for harsher measures, execution of all hostile Kryptonians as unacceptable threats. Others pushed for more lenient approaches. Longer rehabilitation periods, different therapeutic modalities. The philosophical battle raged for 2 hours. Finally, Federation President Gereshigno called for order. The Council will vote on the Tribunal's recommendations. All those in favor of accepting these proposals as written. The vote was close, 63% in favor, 37% opposed. But democracy had spoken. The Tribunal's recommendations are adopted, Gereshigno declared. Kal-El is granted full autonomous status. General Zod and 7 disciples will enter conditional integration programs. 16 disciples will remain in permanent containment pending future evaluation. This council session is concluded. As representatives dispersed, Captain Picard approached Kal-El in the chamber's antechamber. Congratulations. You're officially free. No more monitoring, no more oversight. The Federation trusts you to act according to your conscience. A trust one intend to honor, Kal-El replied. But Captain, I want to request assignment. I'm not interested in wandering the galaxy aimlessly. I want purpose, structure, a role that utilizes my capabilities while serving Federation ideals. What would you recommend? Picard considered carefully. The Federation faces constant challenges, natural disasters on member worlds, ships in distress in deep space, first contact scenarios with potentially hostile species. We could establish a new position, Emergency Response Coordinator. Someone with capabilities to respond to crises that exceed conventional Starfleet resources. You would operate independently but coordinate with Starfleet when situations require your unique abilities. I would be a first responder for catastrophic emergencies, Kal-El understood. Arriving when conventional help is insufficient, providing assistance until Starfleet resources can take over. Captain, that's exactly what I've been hoping for, a way to serve without dominating, to help without controlling. I accept. Excellent, Picard said, extending his hand. Welcome to the Federation's Emergency Response Infrastructure, Coordinator Kal-El. Your first assignment is already waiting. 6 weeks later, Epsilon Canaris System ***. The colony world of Epsilon Canaris 3 was dying. A rogue asteroid, 3 kilometers in diameter, traveling at 47 kilometers per second, was on an unavoidable collision course with the planet. Impact would occur in 14 hours, generating an extinction-level event that would kill all 4 million colonists. Starfleet had scrambled every available ship, but none could reach Epsilon Canaris in time. Tractor beams wouldn't work on an object that massive traveling that fast. Photon torpedoes might fragment it, but the resulting debris field would be equally catastrophic. Evacuation was impossible, 4 million people couldn't be transported off-planet in 14 hours. Kal-El received the distress call while coordinating disaster relief on Rigel 7. He was in orbit within 90 minutes, his superspeed flight exceeding any starship's warp capability over short distances. The asteroid hung in space like a death sentence, ancient, dead rock carrying enough kinetic energy to crack a planet's crust. Kal-El studied it with his enhanced vision, calculating mass, velocity, structural integrity. The mathematics were brutal. Stopping this object would require redirecting more kinetic energy than most starships generated in a year. Enterprise, this is Kal-El, he transmitted. I'm at the asteroid's position. Preparing to attempt deflection. Kal-El, our calculations suggest the kinetic energy exceeds your capability, Data's voice replied. The asteroid's momentum is approximately 8.7 times 10 superscript 2 superscript 2 kilogram meters per second. Even with your strength, you cannot generate sufficient counterforce to significantly alter its trajectory. Then I'll have to exceed my capabilities, Kal-El replied. Data, sometimes the math doesn't account for determination. Kal-El out. He flew to the asteroid's surface, planted his feet against ancient stone, and pushed. His muscles strained, actually strained, something that rarely happened. His Kryptonian cells burned through solar energy at unprecedented rates. His bones, dense beyond any natural material, compressed microscopically under the impossible load. And the asteroid began to slow. It wasn't dramatic. No sudden course change, no spectacular deflection. Just gradual, agonizing deceleration as one being pitted biological impossibility against cosmic momentum. Kal-El pushed for 6 hours straight, never pausing, never resting, burning through every reserve of solar energy his cells had stored. His costume scorched from friction heat. His skin, normally invulnerable, showed stress fractures, microscopic cracks where even Kryptonian durability reached its absolute limits. His vision blurred, his hearing faded, his consciousness teetered on the edge of shutdown. But he kept pushing. On Epsilon Canaris 3, 4 million colonists watched their sky, seeing the impossible, a star that grew brighter, then stopped, then began to dim. The asteroid was slowing, its trajectory shifting fractionally. It would miss the planet. By meters. But it would miss. When Kal-El finally stopped pushing, the asteroid drifted past Epsilon Canaris 3 with a clearance of 847 meters, close enough that atmospheric drag pulled small fragments down as meteor showers, but far enough that the main body passed harmlessly by. 4 million lives saved through one being's refusal to accept that some problems couldn't be solved. Kal-El collapsed on the asteroid's surface, his body completely depleted. No energy remained. No strength. Just relief that he'd succeeded, that mathematics and determination had aligned at precisely the right moment. The Enterprise found him 12 hours later, still unconscious, his body slowly regenerating under yellow sun exposure. Dr. Crusher materialized beside him with a full medical team. "My God," Beverly whispered, scanning his depleted physiology. He burned through every calorie of stored energy. His cells are running on fumes. If this had taken 30 minutes longer, he'd have died from complete cellular starvation. They transported him to the Enterprise's sickbay, where he remained unconscious for 2 days while his Kryptonian biology slowly recharged. When he finally woke, Captain Picard was waiting. "You saved 4 million lives," Picard said simply. "By any measure, that's heroism of the highest order. But Kal-El, you nearly killed yourself doing it. Data's calculations were correct, you shouldn't have been able to deflect that asteroid. Yet you did anyway." "How?" "I didn't calculate whether I could," Kal-El replied, his voice still weak. "I calculated how many would die if I didn't try. The math was simple, attempt the impossible or accept 4 million deaths. I chose to attempt. Sometimes, Captain, determination matters more than probability. A philosophy that will get you killed if applied too often," Picard cautioned. "But Kal-El, I understand. You're learning the burden that comes with your capabilities, that you can never be certain you've done enough, helped enough, saved enough. That's the weight Captain Kirk described decades ago. The responsibility of command magnified to cosmic scale. How do you live with it?" Kal-El asked. "How do you accept that you can't save everyone?" "By understanding that trying to save everyone is hubris," Picard replied gently. "Kal-El, you're one being. Extraordinary, yes, but ultimately limited. You cannot be everywhere, cannot prevent every tragedy, cannot solve every crisis. If you try, you'll destroy yourself attempting the impossible. You must learn to accept that some people will suffer, some will die, despite your best efforts. That's not failure, that's reality." "But I could have done more," Kal-El protested. "While I was deflecting that asteroid, there were probably dozens of other emergencies throughout the Federation. People I could have helped if I'd been there instead. And if you'd been at those other emergencies, Epsilon Canaris would have died, Picard countered. Kal-El, you made a choice. You prioritized based on available information. 4,000,000 lives versus dozens or hundreds elsewhere. The mathematics favored your decision. But you're torturing yourself with what-ifs that are ultimately meaningless. You cannot be omnipresent. You can only be present in one place at a time, making the best decisions possible with available information. Kal-El was silent, processing this wisdom. So I accept limitation. Accept that my power has boundaries. You accept that perfection is impossible, Picard corrected. That even gods cannot save everyone, and attempting to do so leads only to madness or martyrdom. Kal-El, the greatest lesson power teaches is humility, recognizing that capability doesn't equal omnipotence, that strength doesn't eliminate vulnerability. You learned that fighting Zod, nearly dying in a fusion reactor. Now you must learn it applies to every aspect of your existence. You are extraordinary, but you are not infinite. Thank you, Captain, Kal-El said quietly. I needed to hear that. I've been carrying the weight of the entire Federation, feeling responsible for every tragedy I couldn't prevent. It's exhausting. Which is why you need to establish boundaries, Picard advised. Determine what emergencies you'll respond to, what threshold of crisis justifies your intervention. You cannot be everywhere, so you must prioritize. And Kal-El, you must also allow yourself rest, relationships, life beyond constant crisis response. Even gods need sabbaticals. Sabbaticals, Kal-El repeated, tasting the concept. Time for myself rather than constant service. Captain, that feels selfish. It's necessary, Picard insisted. Burnout destroys even the most capable individuals. You've been operating at maximum intensity. Since awakening, constant evaluation, combat, emergency response. When did you last simply exist without purpose or obligation? When did you last experience joy rather than duty? Kal-El couldn't answer. Since awakening, every moment had been defined by crisis, threat, or obligation. He'd never simply lived. I'll take your point under advisement, Captain, he said finally. But for now, I need to complete my recovery. Dr. Crusher estimates another 36 hours before I'm fully recharged. Then I should check on Zod's integration progress. About that, Picard said, pulling up a report. General Zod has been assigned as military consultant to Starfleet Tactical. He's developing defensive protocols against Kryptonian-level threats, essentially teaching us how to defeat beings like himself. Admiral Brackett reports he's been surprisingly cooperative, even enthusiastic about the work. Because it allows him to demonstrate superiority, Kal-El understood. Zod needs to prove Kryptonian military doctrine exceeds Federation tactics. By teaching you how to fight Kryptonians, he gets to showcase his expertise while simultaneously making himself indispensable. It's brilliant strategy, serving Federation interests while satisfying his need for dominance. And you're comfortable with that arrangement? As long as his actions serve the Federation, I don't care about his motivations, Kal-El replied. Zod will never be a true believer in democratic principles. But if we can channel his need for significance into productive contributions, that's success. He's contained through purpose rather than imprisonment. A wise assessment, Picard acknowledged. Though I suspect Zod would object to being described as contained through anything. Let him object, Kal-El said with a slight smile. As long as he continues contributing positively to Federation security, his philosophical objections are irrelevant. That's the compromise we've reached. Behavior matters more than belief. Epilogue, 1 year later ***. Kal-El floated in space above Earth, watching humanity's homeworld turn beneath him. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds, a living jewel against the void. So similar to the descriptions of Krypton he'd inherited from genetic memory, yet utterly unique. This world had become home in ways he'd never expected. Not because it replaced Krypton, nothing could replace his lost civilization. But because Earth's humanity, and the Federation they'd built, had shown him what civilization could be when guided by principles rather than power. Captain Picard's voice came through his communicator. "Kal-El, how are you enjoying your sabbatical?" "It's strange, Captain," Kal-El admitted. "I spent 2 weeks on Risa, the Federation's premier resort world, and kept hearing emergencies I felt obligated to respond to. Ships in distress, accidents, small crises. I had to consciously choose not to intervene, to trust that conventional help was sufficient." "And was it?" Picard asked. "Yes," Kal-El acknowledged. "Every emergency resolved without my intervention. The Federation functions quite well without a flying alien responding to every crisis. It's humbling, actually. I'm not as necessary as I believed." "You're not necessary for routine operations," Picard corrected. "But you remain invaluable for situations that exceed conventional capabilities. Kal-El, you've responded to 14 major crises in the past year. You've saved approximately 8.6 million lives directly, prevented 3 planetary extinctions, and provided emergency assistance that no Starfleet vessel could have delivered quickly enough. That's extraordinary service. And yet I feel like I should be doing more," Kal-El confessed. "Captain, how do you ever feel like you've done enough?" "You don't," Picard replied honestly. "You simply do your best with available resources and accept that perfection is impossible. Kal-El, you've spent a year learning to be the Federation's guardian. Perhaps it's time you learn to be something more than a guardian. A person. Someone with interests beyond crisis response, relationships beyond professional colleagues, identity beyond your capabilities." "And how do I do that?" Kal-El asked, genuinely uncertain. "By living," Picard said simply. "By exploring, learning, experiencing the universe for reasons beyond duty. Kal-El, you've earned the right to simply exist, not as weapon, not as guardian, but as a being whose value transcends utility. Take that sabbatical seriously. Find something that brings you joy rather than purpose. Discover who Kal-El is when he's not saving the day." "Captain, I'm not sure I know how to be anything but useful," Kal-El admitted. "On Krypton, I was training to be a scientist. Here, I'm a living crisis response system. I've never been, just a person. Someone who exists for their own sake rather than for what they can contribute." "Then that's your next mission," Picard declared. "Learn to value yourself independent of your utility. Learn what it means to live rather than merely serve. And Kal-El? That might be the hardest challenge you've faced yet. Harder than fighting Zod, harder than deflecting asteroids. Learning to believe you deserve existence beyond usefulness, that's revolutionary for someone raised to view themselves as a tool." Kal-El stared at Earth, processing this wisdom. Below him, billions of beings lived lives of purpose and meaning that had nothing to do with saving the world. They pursued art, love, philosophy, joy, experiences valuable for their own sake rather than for external utility. Could he learn to do the same? Could someone with godlike power simply be? "I'll try, Captain," Kal-El said finally. "I'll attempt your mission. Though I suspect learning to value myself will prove harder than any physical challenge I've faced." "Most worthwhile things are," Picard replied. "Good luck, Kal-El. And remember, the Federation will be here when you return. The galaxy will survive your sabbatical. Give yourself permission to be more than a guardian. Be a person. Be Kal-El, not Superman." The transmission ended. Kal-El remained floating above Earth, contemplating the impossible, that his greatest power wasn't strength, speed, or invulnerability. It was the freedom to choose what kind of being he wanted to become. And for the first time since awakening in this strange, wonderful universe, Kal-El understood that he'd been granted the rarest gift any god could receive. The chance to discover his own humanity. To be continued in The Adventures of Superman, Federation Guardian. Conclusion. The Federation's discovery of Superman represented more than first contact with a powerful alien, it represented a philosophical challenge to civilization's core assumptions. Could beings of godlike power coexist with democratic principles? Could strength serve rather than dominate? And most profoundly, could someone designed as a living weapon learn to value themselves as a person? Kal-El's journey from stasis pod specimen to Federation Guardian proved these questions had affirmative answers, but only when courage met compassion, when institutions trusted individuals despite rational fear, and when power voluntarily constrained itself through ethical commitment rather than external force. General Zod and his disciples remained wild cards, military zealots contained through purpose rather than imprisonment, contributing to Federation security while maintaining ideological opposition to democratic principles. Their conditional integration represented calculated risk, but also unprecedented opportunity, proof that even those raised for conquest could choose service when given meaningful alternatives. 16 disciples remained imprisoned, psychological casualties unable to adapt to a universe that rejected might makes right philosophy. They served as sobering reminders that redemption wasn't universal, that some beings couldn't transcend their conditioning. Yet their existence didn't invalidate the successes, it merely proved that transformation required both opportunity and individual choice. The Federation learned invaluable lessons about integrating extraordinary capabilities into egalitarian society. Power didn't negate personhood. Capability didn't determine rights. And sometimes, the greatest strength was the wisdom to recognize voluntary limitation as victory rather than defeat. Kal-El learned that even gods needed sabbaticals, that perfection was impossible, and that value existed independent of utility. He'd spent his Kryptonian life training to contribute. He'd spent his Federation life learning to simply be. Both lessons were necessary. Both were hard-won. As Earth turned beneath him, as billions of ordinary lives unfolded without need for godlike intervention, Kal-El made a choice: he would learn to be more than a guardian. He would discover what it meant to live, not just serve, but truly live, in a universe that had shown him that power's highest expression was the choice to be gentle. Somewhere in the vast Federation, emergencies would arise. Crises would demand intervention. And Kal-El would respond when needed, as he'd committed to do. But between those moments, he would explore, learn, love, and discover what it meant to be Kal-El of Krypton and Earth, a being whose greatest power wasn't strength, but the courage to be vulnerable in a universe that would have forgiven invulnerability. Live long and prosper. More stories await.